5:17 p.m. This is the special budget meeting on Wednesday, August 12th, 2020. Please join me for the, do we have to do call to order first? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, could we please have a roll call vote, or roll call? Getting there, guys.
Commissioner Bonzal. Here. Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier. Commissioner Schlegel.
Here.
Commissioner Stonehouse.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill.
Here.
And Mayor Smith.
Here. Brings us to approval of the agenda, and I believe we have an item to add to the consent agenda.
Yeah,
Mayor Pro Tem Hill, you want to make that motion?
yes, thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, did you want to excuse Commissioner?
Oh, thank you. Looks like Commissioner Frazier is still away on business. Do we have a motion to excuse him? Commissioner Stonehouse?
I move to excuse Commissioner Frazier as he is out of town on business.
Thank you. Second? Commissioner Schlegel?
Second.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to approval of the agenda, Mayor Pro Tem Hill.
I would like to add an item under the consent agenda as 1B, approve the minutes of the closed session of the August 10, 2020 commission meeting.
So you would like to approve the agenda as written with that addition?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, do we have a second? Commissioner Davis?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes 6-0. I have no announcements this evening. Moving on to public comment. And just a reminder for the commissioner to speak really closely into the microphone. It's especially hard with the masks for folks at home to hear us. Do we have any public comment this evening?
Yes, we do have one written public comment.
Okay.
There is, I believe, no one in the Zoom waiting room to make a comment, but the public comment is from Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street. There were no lifeguards at Clark Lambros Park in the summer of 2020. This meant the beach wheelchair was not deployed. What will the city be doing in fiscal year 2021 to ensure that there are lifeguards at Clark Lambros Park and that the beach wheelchair is available for use? Thank you, Margaret Brum.
Thank you, City Clerk. Brings us to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion on consent? Commissioner Schlegel?
I make the motion to accept the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Bonzal?
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes 6-0. Moving on to new business. We've got several items here tonight. We're discussing, it's our first of 4 budget sessions. And on the docket for tonight, we have a budget overview, wages and fringe benefits, general fund, non-departmental revenues, central admin, admin services such as city clerk, elections, human resources, information technology, and then fire department. So at this point, I believe I'll turn it over to the city manager and our CFO, and they will take it from here. We have some more informal discussion. I don't believe we're voting on any of these items tonight. That will be part of the overall vote for the budget prior to October 1. So we'll go from here. So up first, we've got this number 2 budget overview.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and city commissioners and all the city staff that will be zooming in. Tonight is very different for us because of the COVID situation. We will be having the regular dog and pony show. Instead of them sitting in the hot seat here, they'll be at home in their own hot seats, but they will still be presenting. So feel free to ask questions at any time. I do want to thank Kyle and Sean. They did a tremendous effort to get us to be able to do this in this format. So thank you to both of them. And for the budget overall, I do want to thank Katie Burnett, the staff accountant. She did a tremendous job in making it look presentable. and she did it in very quick fashion and put up with all of my last-minute changes. So even though she's probably ready to kill me, I do appreciate all that she did to get this done in very short order. So we do have the proposed budget for FY21. The way the format is, once we get into the departments presenting, so the normal format will be, there will be a fact sheet for each department, and that explains what each department does. And it also shows their personnel, and it shows, some statistics to show that, for the money that is spent in that department, this is basically the results that we're getting. We also, if a department has fees that they charge for services, so after the fact sheet will be the fee schedule. And then after that, we'll get into the meaty part of the budget, the numbers, the fun part. So that's pretty much how every department is set up. Different for this year too, I tried to eliminate as much page flipping as we could. So everything is presented instead of numerical order by fund and department. It's now, this budget book is put in order of how it's going to be presented. So hopefully that will be beneficial. And the format is more geared towards an electronic overview. I know we provided each one of you with a book, and it still came out nicely, but it's still a lot, it's more easy to read if you look at the electronic version of it. So with that, just a few things going into this budget. As you know, we're still very uncertain about certain key revenues. The state is going to hold another revenue conference. I haven't heard the exact date, but as of about a month ago, they were saying end of August, 1st of September. So this will be very unusual for us. We're asking you to, we're going to be presenting a budget and basically asking you to approve it before we even know what the final numbers are going to be. So depending on what the state does, we could be, coming back at it in another month or two to take another swing at some things, just depending on how their revenue estimates come out. As of about a month ago, it was looking pretty dire, but I'm hearing now they aren't thinking it's as dire as it once was. But like I said, we'll have to wait until they have this revenue estimating conference, and that will determine the numbers that we need to put in our budget. One thing that's unique to this budget too, and I thought was pretty cool, and Katie gets all the credit for this one, but if you go to the table of contents and you want to just look at one particular item, let's say you want to look at everybody's favorite department, finance and accounting, you can just click on that and it will take you right there. So I thought that was a pretty neat feature. So thank you, Katie, for doing that. And with that, I did want to mention too, Mike had wanted me to mention a little bit about the current year. So we have applied, due to COVID, we have applied for 3 different programs that the feds and state are offering. There's a 4th one that they're gearing up, which is more towards the water fund. And our name is in the hat for that one, but they still have to work out some details. But the ones we've applied so far is geared towards public health and safety, which in our case is the police and fire departments. So the one program which would have the most benefit to us is a program that will reimburse for police and fire wages for the months of April and May. There's a possibility there could be a second round, which would cover additional months. But on a webinar I listened to this morning, they expect all the funding to be dried up after the first round, so they aren't expecting the second round. But still not bad. Just from that one, we expect, if it's fully approved, we expect to get $600,000 for that one, which would be immediate FY20 relief. There's also a program for hazard pay for these same people. That's where you can give them basically a premium for having worked during COVID-19, and that covers up to $1,000 per employee. We applied for, I think it was 63 employees that we applied for. So that one, we will only pay if we get the grant. The first one, we've already paid those expenses, so that's why it would be good if we got reimbursed for that one. The second one I just mentioned, the hazard pay, we would only pay if we get the grant. And then the third one was to provide for some actual expenses, supplies, and that type of thing. I applaud Captain Lorela. He put in some lost revenue items as well. So that one we could get reimbursed only like $300 to $400 if they just go with the actual expenses, but it could be closer to $12,000 if they allow the lost revenue, which I at least applaud his aggressiveness in that one. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there is one more geared towards the water customers, and it's explicitly for people that are in the food assistance program, so it wouldn't be for everyone. It would just be for those people that are already in the food assistance program, but it's designed to give them relief on their water and some of their sewer bills during this time. They're still working out the details, and as we know more, we'll figure that out and let everybody know what's going on there. So, having said that, I'm ready to get started into the budget. So, just a few items in the transmittal letter, starting page 5. I don't know if you had a chance to read that, but just a brief overview. We did give you a balanced budget, but in order to balance it in the general fund, we're projecting right now $369,000 of fund balance needed. Now that number could very well change based on what the state says later once they have their revenue estimating conference. Staff is not recommending any increase in the utility bills, in the utility rates, and you've already seen a presentation based on that by Ratellis, and it could work, it will work for us even if we delay the rate increases by a year, but staff just felt like with everything going on, it would just behoove us to not recommend any rate increase for FY21. So basically, for the general fund, we're looking at about a $23 million budget, which is roughly $1 million more than last year. And we didn't budget for any salary increases other than those that are step increases. I want to thank the unions for agreeing to those contracts that were expiring. They did extend those for 1 year and agreed to no wage increase. We're also not putting in wage increases for any department heads and middle managers and the city manager. We did see some changes in fringe benefits, but those were just rate increases, and they really didn't go up in total a whole lot, not as much as I was fearing. So that part of the budget is working out good for FY21. We're also seeing some debt service increases because we did have 2 bond issues this year that were plugged in. But other than that, the things that we can control, and I think you'll see the things that we can control, I think staff did a very good job in budgeting. And really the only increases are those things we cannot control. So I do want to thank all the staff for their prudence in budgeting. So I don't know if you have any questions on the transmittal letter. If not, yes.
Just a clarification, the 369,000, what percentage of the fund balance would that number be approximately?
We have about just over $11 million spendable fund balance. I don't have enough fingers and toes to calculate that, but it would just be, it's a very small percentage.
Yeah, it's less
so,
than
yeah.
1%. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So with that, we can go straight into the budget. So those of you, any public watching, the budget is on the city's website. Sean was able to get a link to it on the front page. So again, thank you, Sean. So anybody looking on YouTube or channel 191, feel free to follow along. You'll see exactly what we are. And so using our new method, I'm going to go straight to the first page. We're going to start with page 50. And tonight we're scheduled to go through page 131. And I think it's a 267-page document, so we'll get almost half of it done tonight. So starting page 50, these are the non-departmental revenues. These are the revenues that aren't easily spread into any particular department. As each department comes up to present, they'll also discuss the revenues that are specific to their department. But this is mostly property tax related and other items that we don't, in revenue sharing, other items that we can't easily put into a single department. Property taxes, we're recommending the tax millage remain the same at 14.9225 mils, which is well below the Headley limit and also our charter limit. But if you'll notice, if the FY21 requested, we're still seeing the downward slide in property taxes based on and also what we now call the old hospital. Those were our number 1 and number 3, I think, highest taxpayers, and now they've fallen down the list. One item I did want to note that was in the transmittal letter, if I can find it here real quick. Oh yeah, so 1 mil of property tax, at one point we were right on the edge of $700,000. That's what 1 mil in property tax would get us. Based on this budget, it's now at roughly $597,000. So you can see what a hit the general fund has taken. The amazing part is we haven't laid off anybody. We haven't cut services. We've done a lot of internal things to make it work out. And as you've noticed the past couple of years, including the budget we're presenting, we are, using fund balance to budget. But fortunately, we had the foresight many years ago to start building up the fund balance to prepare for this. So even though we're taking a pretty big hit in property taxes, we're able to maintain that. The hope is the WE property can get back on the, fully taxable as quickly as possible, and also hopefully the old hospital can be put in a developer's hands and more taxable value from that as well. Another issue, well, of course, state revenue sharing. We already talked about that. We still have to wait for the state. Cable TV franchise, which is that 101,614 number. The name of the game now is, cable cord cutting, and people are going to streaming services. So the more that happens in Marquette, the less cable TV franchise revenue we'll receive. We think the number we put in now is pretty safe, but it just depends. If people start going to these other streaming services, that will be a decline for us. Payment in lieu of taxes. That's going down and could go down further. The biggest portion of that is based on the BLP. And if you'll remember, it was just over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, that we changed the formula for calculating that to where now it's based on revenue. And we are seeing some declines there, but I just want to say, even though it's declining, it would have declined even more if we had stayed on the same formula that we were. So I think city staff, and I also want to thank BLP staff for having the foresight to kind of see that happening and head that off as much as we could. So that's really it for non-departmental revenues. If you have any questions there, I'll be happy to entertain those.
Gary, would you mind to go into a little bit more detail on the state revenue sharing and what your thoughts are there?
Okay, state revenue sharing, there's two components to it. There's the constitutional portion and there's a statutory portion. And both portions are largely made up of sales tax revenue, and there's also other items like income taxes and other smaller type of items. And really what happens is all of those revenues are sent to Lansing. So let's take sales tax, for instance. If something is bought in Marquette, that sales tax money doesn't stay in Marquette. It's sent to Lansing, and then it's based on some type of incomprehensible formula that they use, but they send it out to the various municipalities. And so what could happen, and does happen, that we see when there's a recession, that those revenue items go down because there's fewer items being bought, and so there's less money to divide out. The numbers that they gave us were showing an increase. I really do expect those to go down a little bit, but not as much as I was fearing even a month ago. Now, the statutory revenue sharing portion is a little interesting, what they're going to do for the current year. So they call that the CVTRS portion, which stands for City, Village, Township Revenue Sharing. And there's a few steps we have to go through to qualify for it, but if we fully qualify, that's roughly $380,000 to $390,000 for the city. We fully expect to qualify. What they're doing this year, though, they're suspending, the state is suspending sending statutory revenue sharing. But what the state is going to do, they're going to use their portion of the CARES Act funding, which is for COVID. And not only are they going to replace it, but they're promising to give us 50% more. So that's just for this fiscal year. So I'm like, yeah, we'll take all of that we can get. Now, I really don't expect that to carry over into the next fiscal year, but I'm still hopeful that they'll keep the $391,000 that we're projecting we'll receive for that.
I know everything's subject to change, but I'm focused on two things. The incomprehensible formula, which I know it's a difficult thing to figure out. And the big question mark of what's going to happen. So I just see an increase here, and I don't know that I believe that's going to be the case, but
Yep.
I guess we'll just roll with it till we know otherwise. That's pretty much what we need to do.
And these numbers were provided by the state,
Okay.
and they did that in mid-May, so we're just using numbers that they provided. But like I said, we won't know until I do this second revenue estimating conference, which we'll hopefully know in 2, 3, 4 weeks. We should know what's going to happen there.
Okay, and depending how different those numbers are, I assume that you may have some backup plans that you're ready and willing to do if you need to.
Yes, my bags are packed and I'm ready to go.
Okay,
at
that's
any
what I
time.
wanted to hear. I don't need to know what they are at this point, but I just want to know that you're thinking about it. Thank you.
Any other questions on that part? With that, we're ready to move on, and central administration will start with the city commission budget. And I think Wendy was going to present that.
Good evening. We'll start out on page 51. The authorized positions for city commission, we have 7 commissioners with a salary of $7,900 for each, with the mayor an additional $3,100 per year. The local officers compensation committee, they meet in the odd years. They will meet next August 2021 to discuss the commission salary, so there is no increase for this year. Below the program statistics, fiscal year 2020 estimated 24 regular commission meetings, 5 special commission meetings, and 9 work sessions. Next page, the revenue estimated Mayoral wedding service fee. Usually we estimate right around 2, the Mayoral Mary 2. It's estimated at 100. Commission chambers and conference rooms estimated $30 for a total of $130 for revenue. The next page, page 53. Let's see, we discussed the wages, Social Security, workers' comp will be discussed with Human Resources. Down to 727, office supplies. That was stayed the same at 500. Operating supplies, 740, that's food and supplies. We estimated last year and we estimated a little bit lower, so we went a little bit higher this year at 2,500. 101, 860, transportation. This is, if you see the breakdowns below, this is MML conference, UP Education Summit, Northern Michigan Public Service Academy, and training. That was estimated at $19,060. 101, 880, community promotions, that's $45,500. It's a little bit less. This year we did not budget for the Marquette Chamber. It was $5,000 less. Those breakdowns are below. 900, printing and publishing, we stayed the same at 150. Vehicle and equipment rental, line item 945, we stayed at 1,000. And membership fees, 960, that was 10,450, and that's broken down with Michigan Municipal League, Mayor's Association, and Great Lakes Initiative. That's it.
I have a question, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
Under transportation, some of these conferences we already know won't be held in person. Is there a way we can reduce?
We can.
The budget?
Yeah. Yep, this is all.
For example, I know for,
proposed.
yeah.
We can, yep.
The fall conference, which here is listed as 9,300 for transportation, it's all virtual. Would the registration fees come out of this line item as
So
well?
no,
or would that
these
be
ones are for next year, so it's next spring and next fall. So
Oh, you're right.
if we want to cut, I know this one is.
The
would
fall
be in-
conference, yeah, it
the
starts,
19
it's like
budget.
September 29th to October 1st or 2nd.
Right,
So, okay.
right. So we would have budgeted.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, and we may or may not know what's gonna happen next fall and next spring, so never mind, I think leave it, I
Okay.
thought it was for this fall.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that they've already found a way to spend that. Right, Gary?
You bet. Whatever you want to do, you bet.
Yeah, that was the only question I had.
Alrighty.
Is there any professional development for staff? Is this all for this line item?
This is commission, Mike will discuss staff next for managers. That's it.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I owe a big apology to Jen. I jumped the gun. Jen is supposed to give a presentation on wages and fringes, and I'm glad she isn't sitting here next to me because she'd be kicking my shins right now. So if we could have Jen do her presentation. And what we do, we have Jen present the overall wages and fringe benefit budget so that as each department comes up, we don't have to spend time going over each one because a lot of it is very consistent. So we just prefer the individual departments to start down, basically office supplies and just on down and just point out highlights. We don't want each department to go through each line item, but if you have specific questions, we'll be glad to answer. But and I really apologize, Jen, but if we could get you to do your presentation now, that would be good. So thank you.
No problem, Gary. I was nervous, so I gave you another moment to listen to Wendy and calm down. So, as Gary said, I'm Jen with Page, representing Human Services. So I'm going to go through the wages and fringe benefits for whole organization, and that's very good for other departments. Before I start, I just want to take one moment to say how very impressed I've been during my short tenure in this department. The staff I work with now more than ever has really stepped up during these challenging times. I've been exposed to every department in such a short time, and I've really come to appreciate my fellow coworkers, our attorneys, and especially the city manager. He has really been a lighthouse in this storm, so thank you. On Monday, Commissioners, I sent you a pretty sizable package of information to prepare you for tonight's overview. And that has a lot more detailed information than the highlights I'll cover right now. But we'll start out with the salaries and wages. As far as the big picture goes with salaries, we have a couple of factors to consider that aren't addressed in the provided summary. We have 5 union groups total and typically only budget for contractual increases. This year, we only have the police and DPW supervisor units in the middle of their contracts, so they're the only groups with budgeted increases. We've also considered staff with scheduled step increases organization-wide, and otherwise we have not included any increases in this budget for both full and part-time employees. The total salary budgeted this year is roughly $12.6 million as compared to last year's budgeted amount of roughly $12.4. In the last year, we've had several full-time employee vacancies due to retirements and the addition of the 2 positions last year. Last year, 2 positions were approved through the budget process, that being the motor pool mechanic and a full-time rental inspector in the fire department. And we have not yet filled those positions. We've not yet filled the mechanic position, and we've not yet backfilled the new position in the fire department. So these were realized in savings for this current fiscal year in 2020. But in addition to these 2 positions, we still have 6 other full-time positions open, and some of them have been vacant for several months, and we've realized savings from that as well. In total, so far, the city manager wanted me to give an estimate of what we would have saved from this, and I know in July we likely didn't save anything by being down firefighters due to the overtime requirement, so I'm going to be conservative, and it's a roughly $200,000 for this reason. And then we did participate in the State of Michigan Work Share program over the summer as well for savings. The other items on fringe benefits are longevity, Social Security, and Medicare, but the next big one is really our health insurance coverage. We utilize Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan through our broker called 44 North, and in case you're unfamiliar, the state puts a limit on the amount a public employer can contribute to a medical benefit plan for each of its employees through PA 152. This amount is called the hard cap, and the city currently utilizes the hard cap method for determining our contribution to our employees' health insurance. So once the annual rate is released by the state for each plan type, we use the figure to budget for our employees, plus the cost of dental and vision coverage. So in addition to this, the city is experience rated by Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Blue Cross utilizes a look-back period to determine what kind of claims we had prior to project our rates for the next renewal. As of our renewal July 1st, our rates went down by about 6%, and the hard cap amount went up by 2% for the remainder of 2020 and 3.3% for the remainder of our plan year in 2021. Our vision remains the same, and our dental rates actually decreased a little bit for this year. So since this is one of the most important benefits to our employees, the city annually forms a health committee to get a representative from each bargaining unit, as well as management, involved in making decisions on our health insurance renewal packages. And it turned out pretty successfully this year, even though it was in the middle of, quarantine and everything. So our retiree health benefits are also through 44 North and provided by Blue Cross Blue Shield. Any management employees hired after 2005 are ineligible for this benefit, but we do still have 28 management retirees on our group health plan. For bargaining Unit retirees, the benefits vary by bargaining unit. However, the city has ended their obligation for retiree health insurance for all new hires as of 2012 for those employees in Public Works and City Hall unit, and 2013 for those hired in the fire, police, and supervisory. So the budgeted amount for health insurance for actives and retirees this year is $3,359,230. Our life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment coverage. In 2016, we changed this package to Lincoln National Life. Although our rates went up just slightly this year for this package, our annual cost went up just about $2,000. I believe the total is right around $28,000 for the whole package. All of our full-time employees are covered for life insurance and AD&D, and the life insurance is term life, and the amounts vary between bargaining units and management. Long-term disability is included with that package, but it is not, it's not for all staff. The benefit was added several years ago during a contract window as an incentive to employees to switch from a vacation, sick, personal time model over to benefit time model, and was only offered to current management, supervisory, public works, and city hall employees at that time. But in 2017, the commission approved authorizing the LTD benefit for all management employees. Our unemployment insurance rate did not increase this year. Our workers' comp insurance is through, the city is a member of the MML Workers' Comp Fund Pool. Similar to health insurance, our renewal premiums have an experience modifier, which considers the number of claims in the look-back period when determining our rate for the year. And last year we saw a substantial increase, but thankfully are back down to a more reasonable level this year due to a better experience modifier, as well as an increase in the dividend credit we'll receive back from the pool. The dividend this year is about twice as much as we saw last year, so that was good news. Now the biggie, all departments aside from police and fire are covered under the Municipal Employees Retirement System, or MERS. The union groups and 3 active department heads are all enrolled in the defined benefit plan, which is a more traditional pension plan that requires age 55 and 25 years of service, and uses a formula based on final average compensation, a multiplier rate, and contributions to determine the retiree's monthly salary in retirement, but it's a benefit they cannot outlive. The price tag for a benefit like this is not something to take lightly, so the city's been working toward reducing this liability. However, annually our costs increase based on many factors, and in turn our funded ratio decreases slightly, at least for now. MERS uses economic and non-economic assumptions, and an actuary determines based on those things, plus our membership demographics and how the investments are performing to determine what our contributions will be. We currently have 7 divisions, 5 are for unions, and 1 is for senior management, 1 is for middle management. The city's total required contribution is projected at $3,140,136 for fiscal year 21 for the defined benefit plan. The total cost provided to us for each division is divided by the members in the division for budgeting purposes. The one anomaly to this is that I determined in my first budget cycle this spring that in the past the total cost of the senior management division has been historically divided between only the active employees in the division. So this has become a very large dollar figure when you're only dividing the cost by 3 active employees, as we've had 3 division members retire in 2020 and significantly reduce the number of actives. I do plan to change the way I budget this in the future, but this one being my first, I didn't want to make changes like that, not knowing. But our active employees in this division are currently the Director of Municipal Utilities, the Director of Community Development, and the Director of Public Works. So I just wanted to point that out. When you look at those departmental budgets, you'll see that the MERS charges seem to have increased substantially. But it's just, it doesn't, to me, it's not a true representation of their individual pension liability costs. It's just the way that they were divided up. Our new management staff, our newer management staff, and those promoted into management are in a defined contribution plan, which is more like a 401k, where the employee contributes 3% of their salary, and the city contributes 9% for middle managers and 13% for department heads. The total expected liability for the MERS DC plan this year is estimated at $154,161. And lastly, the police and fire employees, aside from clerical staff, are covered under the Police Fire Act 345 retirement system. Their pension is similar to MERS in that it's based on age and years of service, dependent on their final average compensation, and includes a multiplier to determine what their monthly pension amount will be in retirement. This one, however, is administered in-house with the investments managed by Wells Fargo and overseen by the Police Fire Pension Board with the city. The city's required contribution is 46.84% of payroll for police and 41.36% of payroll for fire. And the city's combined contribution projected to be $1,742,470 for this next fiscal year, and the funded ratio for the plan is 75%. The city also offers benefits to our employees that are not a cost to the city and therefore not included in this overview. Well, are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions yet. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Schlegel.
Just a little clarification on the $200,000 realization that you guys had. I'm assuming that those positions weren't filled because of the COVID situation. Was that the reason for those, or were we waiting for a certain time to have those positions filled? What was the deal there?
Yeah, that's correct. We recognized early on that we needed to make up some dollars this budget year. So when those positions became naturally or normally vacant, we just did not backfill them, waiting to see how things turn out financially. We do plan on filling them yet in the future when the money becomes available and when things settle down a little bit.
Okay, so we're not really aggressively trying to fill those positions right now?
Not at the moment. The fire department positions we are, because we basically reached a level there where the overtime was costing us as much as it was saving us. So, and, you know, they've had a lot of inabilities for vacations and things over there because of the overtime schedule. So it just makes sense to fill those positions now.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, Jen, if you wanted to continue.
Mayor, Commissioner Bonzo.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Bonzo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I suppose this is a general question that I had, but this is probably the most appropriate time to ask it. So of course, we've been implementing furloughs. We've got a hiring freeze that's not including police and fire. But I'm just curious. So this is sort of related to Commissioner Schlegel's question, I suppose. But how did we account for the uncertainty in how long those cost-saving measures are going to be in place in the upcoming fiscal year? And you know, how much money are we anticipating saving due to those measures? I mean, how did we account for that in this proposed budget?
I think I hear what you're asking, and I guess it's all, I hate to say it's a guess, but we're just kind of rolling with it from month to month, from actually in 2-week intervals to see how things change or are related to the COVID. And, you know, we are basically trying to save as much as we can when the opportunities arise, keeping in mind that we don't want to reduce services or reduce staff permanently. So we take advantage of every opportunity, whether it be through the CARES Act or through the opportunity of someone who retires or leaves to not fill those positions. At the time that they're not filled, we're able to calculate the savings that would be, we do it in 6-month intervals. So if 6 months out, we'll know the savings we'll have from not filling that position. But if it's a like an emergency services position where it requires overtime, we have to weigh that against the cost of the overtime. So with the COVID, it's really kind of a play as you go, make it happen as you go along scenario. I think that's the question you were asking.
No, I think that's a great answer, and I just think that, you know, so I suppose, like, would I be correct in assuming that, you know, we may see some changes to our estimated fiscal 21 wage and fringe benefit expenses depending on, you know, on
Yes.
how long those policies are in place?
Right. We do have some concepts or ideas in place as to compensating if the money comes around, for example, compensating for the lack of raises this year. I haven't quite nailed down the exact amount yet, and I don't want to get too many people's hopes up because I don't know what we're going to have. So if the opportunity arises and we have the money and it's doable or not going to put us in any further in the debt, then we certainly will relook at the salary ranges this year or for next year.
No, thank you, I appreciate it. I'm sure they would, I'm sure that our employees would appreciate that if possible.
Just don't tell them, okay?
Hopefully none of them are watching. Oh, wait, there's a few of them up there.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
And kind of related to that, I can't remember which meeting this was, but I remember Jen was telling us, as we discussed COVID-related expenses, that there were retirements coming up in the next year. And is that also inside this budget, or we're going to see that inside the department budgets? But that question sort of, I think, related to what Commissioner Bonsall was asking about how are we, it sounds like our bottom line is keep staff and then add very slowly. And then but we also do see, I think it was 6 or 7 more retirements coming. Was that, I have that memory of them. You can correct me.
Yeah, we generally, like, for example, the clerk is retiring on August 31st, so she would be considered in this budget. If, for example, that were a non-compulsory position, we would probably leave it vacant for several months and realize the savings. But because it's basically required by charter and we will fill that position, then we'll backfill up through the ranks, and then that bottom position will probably be left open for a undetermined amount of time until we can realize some level of savings. We do have the 2 retirements I'm aware of, at least right now, are this budget year, unless Gary has some other knowledge. But every time someone retires, there's generally a bumping within. We try to fill from within. There's generally a bumping, and that savings is realized at the entry level. If it's a significant position, such as a department head, which is a greater salary, it might be prudent to leave that position vacant and have that handled by a subordinate for a short amount of time to realize a greater savings in a shorter amount of time. But traditionally, we try to backfill it down to the basic level, entry level.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? I don't see any, so are we done with this section?
Yes, and Jen, again, I apologize for the curveball I threw you, but I think we're ready to get back on track, and
Thank you, Jen.
we can start with page 54, which is the city manager's budget.
Will we bring it in here? Oh, I'm here? Okay. I thought I was going to be off to the side somewhere, not just my voice.
You want to sit here?
No,
You can do it.
no, I will if you want. Okay, first let me say that you need to give Jen a pat on the back because this was her first budget presentation, and I can attest that she's been sweating over it considerably, and she's done a wonderful job, as I would expect. So thanks, Jen. You can go home now. if you want. Thanks. Oh, she does. I take that back. Okay, the executive would be on page 54 of your paper book, and I'm assuming it's the same number on the digital book. The function of the executive, again, is to administer all departments. The department consists of 4 positions: myself, the assistant city manager, Sean, the executive assistant, Wendy, and the management analyst, which currently is vacant and been held vacant because of the uncertainty of the budget. But that was a position previously held by Sean, and when he moved up to the assistant city manager, so we're basically, it's been since February, so we've been realizing probably a $50,000 or $25,000 savings in that position just over the last 6 months. Sean did receive a step increase this year. That's why his salary is up a little bit, and it has been budgeted. Program statistics are something that we provide every year for the commission. It basically outlines all the meetings that I've attended, including work sessions, DDA, MML, managers meetings, things of that nature. I would add to the last statistics, the managers meeting, is that because of the COVID situation, the Marquette County administrators have been meeting weekly every Thursday for an hour, and been trying to work together to help us all through this situation. Any questions on that part? It's pretty simple. Okay. Page 55 is the expenditures. First several up to 727 are administrative and are there every year no matter what. 727 is office supplies. We budgeted $1,400 for next year. We went over a little bit this year, so we added just a little bit more. Operating supplies, $1,000. Going down to 860, transportation, and this is the one that pertains to the MML. It's the city manager expenses for the MML, and as was mentioned earlier when we talked about the commission expenses, that's probably one that we will not be spending because of the digital nature of those meetings now. Vehicle equipment rental is if myself or were to use one of the city cars for a function. We budget $1,000 annually. I have never used that amount. We've always driven my own vehicle, so. But it's there in case we need it. And then membership fees include things like the Economic Club that I'm a member of. Sean's been gracious enough to attend regularly. Northern Michigan Public Safety Academy and $100 for training. So it's a minimal fee. The amount actually budgeted is less than what we did for 2020, but so we're doing well.
Mike, can I please ask about the technology services fund fee? I think maybe it got skipped by accident, but I see it went up, and I'm just
Yeah,
not, I can't remember what that is.
That's got to be a Gary answer, because that's one that I don't have any control over.
I seem to remember it's the fee that kind of gets spread
Yeah.
out throughout the city, and
Yeah,
I'm just wondering what went up to make it, because we're probably going to see an increase elsewhere too on that line item.
Yeah, I think when we get to Todd, and he's he tonight? Yes. Todd from IT will be here later, and you can ask him about all those fees.
Pretty
and how-
creative to just take their expense and spread it out over all the other
Yeah.
departments.
No, I hear about it. I hear.
Everyone uses technology, and we
Yeah,
appreciate
and they
that.
all complain to me about why they got to take that out of their budget, and, we spread it around. So that's what that is.
Other questions or comments on this section? Go ahead,
What,
Secretary.
what with this, having one person down, 25% less staff, is there things that aren't happening, and do you have a plan yet for
Well,
replacement?
yeah, we've had to change some of the workings of the office as far as manning and keeping the office open and that kind of thing. But we've managed, trust me, Wendy and Sean are exceptional employees, and they managed to pick up the slack no matter what. But I think if they were smart, they wouldn't pick it up too much, because
Yeah.
then I wouldn't need this other body. But we've had a little, and I should say it's helped a lot with the building not being open. So there isn't the walk-in traffic that would normally be handled by this position, more as a part of receptionist type job. So, if the building reopens, or when it reopens, it would probably be a little different response for me, that it would be more prudent. But until the building reopens, I don't see any need to fill that just yet.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, next is page 50, nope. sorry,
56.
Just a second. Let me
Right.
cut up page 56, again, everybody's favorite department. And that's why everybody's tuning in right now to see what this department's doing. So in this department, well, as CFO, I'm in charge of what we call financial services, and that encompasses finance and accounting, which we're going to present now. And then just after this one will be the treasurer's budget, and then after that one will be the assessing budget. And we're also in charge of utility billing and those kind of things. So by the time we're done with me, Mary, and Miles, we will have addressed all those areas. But for this, just the finance and accounting part, for staff, there's me, there's the staff accountant, which is Katie, and there's the accounts payable clerk, which is Tara. So without the three of us, the city might as well just fold up and go away. No, just kidding. I don't want to steal any of Mary's thunder, but I do want to say the accounts payable clerk, Tara, the deputy city clerk, not the deputy city clerk, the deputy treasurer, my apologies, Linda Poole, is retiring September 30th. And Tara, the current accounts payable clerk, has been selected to fill that position. So I guess we could say there's going to be some significant savings, because we won't be able to pay any of our invoices for a while. So that'd be good for us. So, but I'll let Mary address that a little bit more. But I do want to thank Tara for all she has done as accounts payable clerk, and she's very deserving of the promotion, and we're all very excited. We're sorry to see Linda go, but we're very excited about what Tara will be doing. So, and then we have the program statistics. These are the things that we do. I know it all looks kind of very boring, but believe me, we're very busy in that department. Going to page 57, as you notice on the revenues, and you'll see this on quite a few, but we call administrative charges. And what that is, that's basically our cost accounting method. GASB, you'll probably hear me refer to GASB quite a bit, but the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they're the ones who dictate how we have to do our accounting. And what they really want us to do is show the true cost, what it is to provide services. So in administrative charges, we've taken those positions like the city manager, the city attorney, the finance department, the treasurer's office, and things, the HR department, and things of that nature. And we're estimating how much time we spend in each particular area, and we're actually charging, like, say, the water fund, the sewer fund, stormwater, and all the what you'd call the enterprise funds. We're showing what it would cost if they had their own staff and had to pay those charges. And then in the general fund, we're showing that as revenue. So it's really just an internal thing. It's not, money, extra money we're actually bringing in, but it's a way of showing this is, if we were billing that out to, say, a separate entity, this is what, each department would be bringing in for that. So hopefully I explained that. If you have any questions, let me know. Going down to the expenses, really the finance, we're very status quo. About the only one that can change is the very bottom line, the rental. So the the finance department, we're in charge of the postage and folding machine, which is very important when it comes to sending out utility bills and those kind of things, tax bills and those kind of items. And the current lease machine that we have is set to expire. So for the next round, this is what we're projecting it's going to cost us to do. Roughly $8,860. Everything else is really status quo. There was a question earlier on the tech services fee. So we treat our technology, which is computers, phones, and those kind of things, we treat those as an internal service fund. And then that internal service fund then charges out each department what their fair share is. And really, Todd can talk more about that later, but I just kind of wanted to give a brief explanation that this is really just funding, all of the computers, all of the phones, and that kind of thing that the city uses. And other than that, I don't have anything to say on finance unless you have any questions you'd like to ask.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Where's the cost of the audit, and do you see that changing? Is that another thing that stays steady state, or?
Yeah, the cost of the audit is in the 801 contractual services account.
That's all it is. That's not very much.
And well, we do spread out the cost of the audit amongst the various departments and funds. So there is more that goes into the 801 than just the audit, but I believe we have one more year left on the current contract, and then we'll be, going out for RFP after FY21.
And then my other question is around bonding, because it seems like this is the place where the bond work happens. And is that part of this piece? And are there the costs associated with that, or has that stayed flat, or do you see that changing with the crazy environment that we're in?
Yeah, the cost of the bonds, even though I do quite a bit of the work on that, we have, and we'll present that a little bit later this evening, but we have the 101-906 fund, which will show the general fund portion. But again, that bond issues, they're spread out amongst various funds, so those charges are spread out, for those funds that are benefiting from the bond, like the water, sewer, the streets, general fund.
So I guess my bigger question, would it even be worthwhile trying to figure out like an overall sort of interest rate that we're paying on the money moving around, or is it low? Like right now, everything's so low, and one thought is that we actually do want to take out bonds and do things right now with things being so low, and particularly if we know it can be backfilled with federal or state money. Thinking about 2021, is that something that we're thinking about as a way to cover some projects that might not be able to be covered otherwise?
Yeah, right now, interest rates are very low. The bond issue we did in June, I believe the interest rate came in at about 1.8%, which is, a really good deal. And, the other factor that we have is we already have a lot of debt out there. So we want to be very careful But, you know, this is a good environment right now to issue debt in, but it's really kind of a day-to-day basis. I mean, what is true today may not be true next week, so you have to be really careful. And but, you know, like I said, this is a good time to be issuing debt if you want to go into debt. I'm trying my best to manage the debt and so that it doesn't get too crazy for us. And so that's really the other factor, is how much debt we already have outstanding, which we'll get into a little bit later too.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Gary.
Okay, thank you. And next up is Mary. She's the city treasurer, and she's also my assistant. And I just want to give her a plug that she's just a tremendous help to me, and she's very knowledgeable. She's also a very good sounding board and has good ideas. And I just want to thank her for all the help and support she provides, not only to the city and the department, but to me personally. So just want to thank Mary, and she is up now.
Thanks, Gary. So we'll start on page 58, I think is where I start. For the Treasurer's Department, we have 4 staff that kind of maintain all of the collections for the city, and as well as all of the tax billing and collections and all the statutory obligations that go on with that. As Gary already mentioned, we are losing our deputy treasurer on September 30th. However, I'm very excited about the staff that we've got coming in. It's going to be a challenging year, but I'm very positive of the outcome that we're going to be going. So to kind of give you an overview of how I approached the budget this year, kind of dig into the revenues on the next page. If anything, I tried to undershoot the revenues, and I tried to overshoot my expenditures to make sure that we're going to be pretty conservative and catch everything in the middle. So first 2 line items in the revenues stay pretty consistent. Trailer park licenses are statutorily defined by MCL. So those are the revenues we receive from the trailer parks. And again, that's a pretty standard number. Don't foresee any changes there. The non-business permits, those are our construction and residential landfill permitting. We have a pretty constant group of about 50 haulers for the city, so I don't see that figure changing very much, and our residentials vary, but again, that's not going to be a large impact. Fees are pretty standard as well. Administrative charges, Gary already talked to you about. Those are the, that's our revenue for the services that we provide to other departments in the city. And here's probably where I undershot the revenue estimate with parking meter tickets and for the restricted tickets. I was a little concerned because of COVID and the shutdown that we were going to experience a loss or a decrease in restricted tickets and parking meters. However, as of today, when I checked this morning, we're already at about 39,000 in restricted ticket revenue and 7,500 in parking ticket revenue. Now, I'll remind you, this is only 50% of the shared revenue. The other 50% is recorded within the police department. So my estimate into next year's budget is probably a little low, but I still think it's a pretty safe place to shop for. I did review the fee schedule, not proposing any changes there. We're still kind of within that parameter of breaking even on the charges that we have. So digging into the budget for expenditures, again, my department is one of those budgets that's predominantly wage and fringe directed. As a matter of fact, about 87% of that total budget is wage and fringe related. So of anything that I can fluctuate, it's only gonna be that last little 13%, which starts at about the office supplies line. But anyway, I'm sorry, going back to what I was saying about the challenge that I'm going to have for the staffing that we've got. My department also has 2 cashier positions these are the entry-level positions for the city. And whenever there's an opportunity to promote or post into another position, typically this is where they come from. And as we are trying to backfill, I am going to be losing one of these positions to a department in the city. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to hire in someone there, as well as to hire a replacement for that AP. So the budget is presented in a way that we're maintaining those positions and not eliminating staffing. Okay, so now into the office supplies line item, which begins at 101-253-727. I budgeted a minor decrease in this one, just because of kind of reviewing the prior year activities. I think we can meet the challenge to kind of decrease the budget there. Postage as well, I'm challenging for a decrease in that budget as well. However, there is enough available to cover all of our tax billing periods that we need to charge for, and as well as reducing the parking citation notifications down to 1 a year, as opposed to the hoped biannual or quarterly. Professional and contractual line item, I'm still budgeting for approximately 18 weeks of temporary labor. As I mentioned, with this department having kind of that entry-level position, I always expect turnover in this department every 2 to 3 years. And in order to kind of hold that position before I have to permanently fill it, we've been in the practice of hiring temporary labor. So why am I mentioning that? Well, just in case we're not allowed to do that, that is an area that we can probably or decrease some of the expenditures in this department. Other than that, the balance in that fund is about $250 for bank charges, for NSF fees, and about $900 annually for parking system administration. Next line item is the technology fee. Again, you'll probably hear more about this when IT gives their presentation. My assumption for why there's an increase is last year we did get the purchase of the parking system, and it was an expensive parking system, very much worth it, but that's probably where that line item is going to increase. Transportation covers also the training expenses for myself and for my staff. Everything for this current fiscal year has been canceled, so we don't have anything left coming out of that budget for for the fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 21, I do anticipate that we will have some sort of virtual training available for myself and my new deputy treasurer. My goal with the deputy treasurer is to get her through the 3-year programming that will allow her to be a Michigan certified professional treasurer. Again, this may be reduced if those trainings are offered virtually. Printing and publishing is pretty consistent. This is the cost of printing the approximately 15,000 tax bills that are prepared each year. Property insurance is covered by the allocation through the city insurance premium, and vehicle rental covers the fleet rental of motor pool vehicles for traveling to, hopefully traveling to any of our trainings. So that's our boring budget in a nutshell. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions? Thank you, Mary. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mary. Next up is the assessing department, which is headed by Miles. And I just want to thank Miles for all he does. His position is about equally as popular as the person who gives parking tickets to people, but it's a very essential function, and Miles is really considered to be one of the best in the state, so we're very lucky to have him. So if we could get Miles, and I think Sean's got to do some tweaking here.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Miles.
Okay, all right, thank you. On page 60, you have the basic outline of the department. You'll see that we have 3 full-time positions within the department. Myself, the city appraiser, who's been there with the city for about 30 years, and then the assessing assistant. And I think Amanda's probably been there 15 years or so. And those are the salary costs there. Under the program statistics, you'll see the value of the city has actually been going up. That is the state equalized values that you're seeing there, not the taxable value. And the distinction there is that the taxable value is what the city receives their revenue stream from. But you can see that there is growth in the city over the 3 years that are presented there as far as new construction and the increase in the values of property. On the next page, about the only item I wanted to call to your attention on page 61 is the land division applications. On the land division applications, what we're asking your permission for there is we have a lot of platted and non-platted land divisions that are presented to the office, and they're very time consuming. And what we're having is an issue with is people are putting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 land divisions on one application. And since the application says that it's $150, what we're asking your permission for is to change that to $150 per division. So if you put 8 divisions on there, you're going to pay 8 times 150. And not only our office is involved with the approval of those or the denial of them, but also community development has to review them for zoning requirements. And so a lot of times it's a time-consuming process for us to take a look at that. And so that's one of your considerations, is to allow us to change that application to say $150 per division. On the next page, which is page 62, it's pretty much
Hey, Miles, could I ask a question before we move on to page 62? Mayor Pro Tem Hill asked if you could maybe explain what a division is, and for those of us who may be not as familiar.
Sure. There's 2 kinds. There's one that is for a platted lot. So in other words, you're in a subdivision, and you have lot 6 of block 7 in one of the subdivisions. And someone decides that they want to divide off 10 feet and sell that, or they want to sell half of the lot. They have to go through a process where they have to get a survey done and submit various documents that are included within the land division application, and then present that to us so that we can take a look at it and see if it's permissible. A platted lot can only be divided 4 times under state law, and it can't be divided more than that. There are exceptions to that, if the court orders it, or if they do a replat. On the non-platted side, you're talking about an acreage parcel, and that is a meets and bounds description. So north 89 degrees, 29 minutes, 13 seconds west. So someone may own 5 acres, and they want to sell off 2 parcels so that someone can build on. And so they'll file that land division application with us, and we'll have to go out and take a look at it. And then planning and zoning looks at it to make sure that the part that's being asked to be split off, as well as the remainder part, meets zoning requirements. So does that answer the question for you?
Yes, it does. Thank you. You can go ahead to page 62. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Page 62, about the only thing that we have control over there is we're asking for a new file cabinet. Every single parcel has to have a folder, and every year we get more and more legal descriptions, more parcels are being split off, and also we have personal property items. So we run out of the many cabinets that we have. We still have run out of space, and so we need to get a new file cabinet for about $500.
I think we can probably make that happen for you, Miles.
Pardon me?
I said, I think we probably can make that happen for you, especially because you skipped over every other line item because everything's the same. So thank you for sparing us. Much appreciated.
No worries. That's about all I have, unless you have other questions.
Other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Bonzel?
Yeah, I actually, thank you for that further kind of elaboration on the land division / lot split fee issue. I guess my only concern with that, and I apologize if this is less of a question and more of a statement, but my concern with that would be that it seems that would be creating a disincentive to increase density where possible, or a disincentive for developers to add as many units or developments on a lot as they otherwise might be able to. I mean, could you maybe address that, or think, explain like how that that decision to move to $150 fee per division was reached? I mean, is that based on the amount of staff time that's generally spent on each of these divisions?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a very simple land division application where we don't have to go back and forth with a lot of emails and help people out, that $150 is probably a break-even position. I can tell you that some of these land divisions take many meetings. They take a lot of time, not only from our department, but from planning and zoning. And so it's a losing proposition. You're putting in a lot more time and money of staff than you're getting back from that $150 fee. Because it is a complicated issue. I mean, it's not, people don't do this every day. Obviously, the surveyors do it every day. They're doing their survey parts, but the rest of the documents that are needed, basically we're trying to help the people through to provide all the documents so that we don't have to reject the application and then they have to come back to us. So we do try to assist them as much as possible.
Can I follow up on that, Evan? And maybe I'm wrong on this, but you can set me straight, please. When you're talking about a division, say I'm a developer and I've got 5 acres and I want to come in with a proposal to turn that into 30 different parcels, however it would work. When we talk about a division here, we're not being charged for that, those 30 different, that's one request. So that's $150, okay? It's not that and then that person could come back and they're like, well, let's also look at it from a 15 parcel development, maybe even a 10 or even a 4 or a 3. So those are all compounding 150s instead of being, you could have multiple parcels in one request, which is still only $150. And if you're trying to justify these expenses, just go ahead and line item what it costs for each department that you're having to address, the time and the, this was a big issue, I think, back when we were looking at the Land Development Code revision, trying to reduce some of the costs to potential developers. And this was one that, you probably were saying, no, let's just leave it, or maybe potentially increase it because it is very time consuming and very expensive. But I wanted to make sure that, it wasn't, when you're looking at one division, it's not like a single division. You could have multiple divisions within that request, but that's all just under the 150. Am I incorrect with that assumption or that analysis?
Yeah, that's what we're asking to change. So what's happening now is the scenario that you just explained. So we have a person coming in and saying, I'm going to turn in one application, but I'm going to have 10 divisions occurring for that one application. So what we're saying is that because of the amount of time that it takes, is we do want them to pay $150 per division for those, let's just use the example of 10. So you would have a $1,500 application fee versus $150. Now that's not the typical application, obviously, and in your example, I think you used the number 30. So in that case, you would probably be looking at a subdivision, which doesn't go through our department at all. So that goes through through Lansing, and if you're going to create a subdivision, that doesn't even come through us because that's an exempt split from the Land Division Act, and it goes through the plating process through lands.
Okay. So my example might have been a little bit excessive, but I think what you did right there is you just completely corrected what I was under the assumption of. If somebody comes in with 3 acres of property and wants to break it down to 3 1-acre parcels, that's going to be 3 times 150, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That could add up to a lot of money in a hurry, but at the same time, I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker as far as density build goes. But good question.
No, thank
Thanks.
you. I would just add, that I think that's why I had that concern, and I think especially if you're talking about like a smaller development, especially if there's still uncertainty as to whether the development's going to move forward or not, it could be a factor. So I just wanted to express that, but yeah, thank you for that explanation.
I think we're good on this section.
Okay, thank you, Miles.
Thank
Looks
you, Miles.
Looks like we're live from the Golden Gate Bridge there, so thank you. Next up is the city attorney, so Ron, page 63.
Ron, are you on?
Oh, good evening.
Oh, hey, Ron.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Smith and the commissioners. I've got Suzanne also on video. If you have questions of either of us, certainly please feel free to do that. We don't actually prepare a budget since the law firm is on retainer. But I will have a couple of comments about the budget just so that a couple things are clear. If they pull up the screen a little bit further, another page. Gary, can you pull up the next page? Okay, that's good. You'll see there's a line item for health insurance. That is a former city attorney, at least once removed, I believe. We don't, as a firm, we're on a retainer, so there's no fringe benefit of any kind. The retainer goes to the firm and the overhead that the firm incurs as a result of being the city attorneys, and it's of course our pleasure to do that. We enjoy this work very much, but I just wanted you to be aware of that fact that the health insurance and other fringe benefits don't belong to us if there are any more. So, you know, like I said, it's been a pleasure for us to work for the city for the last 15 years, and I'm open to questions, or Suzanne's open to questions about the budget.
I don't have any questions, Ron. I appreciate your willingness to come on and share with us, but it doesn't seem like we have a whole lot of changes here. Any questions from the commission? All right, thank you, Ron. Appreciate it.
Could I just, Mayor Smith, could I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
As you know, Jen LePage was appointed Director of Administrative Services just before the COVID crisis broke. And she had not only to do her regular job, which is an enormous job in itself, but she also had to figure out how to deal with this COVID the laws that involve COVID, and it's very complex. And she's done an extraordinary job. I think she needs to be told that. I mean, it's something I've seldom seen anywhere. And then I would also comment that the entire city team is fabulous. They work so hard with one goal in mind, and that's make the commission and the city look as good as they can, and particularly Mike Angeli. I don't think I've ever seen anyone who took his job so personal in terms of his commitment to the city and his loyalty to the city. Maybe it has to do with the fact he's been there a long time, but he's an extraordinary administrator, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate you making those comments, and we certainly appreciate the staff members you've mentioned and the entire staff as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. The check is in the mail. And thank you, Suzanne, too. I know you didn't get to appear, but we appreciate the work that both Ron and Suzanne do.
You mentioned your name.
So thank you both. You're very much appreciated and a big part of the city team. Going on, page 65 is property and liability insurance. This is really just the portion that we aren't able to spread out to other departments. As you'll notice, when you go through other departments and funds, there's a charge for insurance, and this is the property and liability portion. And like I said, this is the part you're seeing here is just the general fund portion that we really can't easily spread to other departments. Do you have any questions on that? It's really just kind of straightforward.
I don't think so. Thank you, Gary.
Next up, page 67 is transfers out. Actually, page 68 is the better page to go to. So really what the general fund is responsible for, it's responsible for balancing out 3 other funds, the major and local street funds, and also Lakeview Arena. We also make a contribution to the Public Art Fund. And then we have the various debt service funds. And if you'll notice in the notes, it's just showing FY21 what we project and the FY20 budget for each one of those. So really, you know, savings in major and local streets or Lakeview Arena, you know, if we can see savings there, that also helps out the general fund as well. The other 2, public art, it's set by ordinance, and I know on Monday night we'll be addressing those items, and if you have any questions about public art, you can address it then. And then a debt service we'll be talking about very shortly here, but this is just the transfer out portion. Any questions on transfers out?
And, yeah, again, I can deal with things better in percentages. So on $11 million, we're transferring out 2.6.
Mm-hmm.
So that's less than 3%, or is that the right number? I'm not very good at that.
25%. 25.
Yeah, it's a lot more than 3%.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, see, that's why you don't have me do math in my head. So it's 25, we're rolling out 25% of the general balance.
Correct. And another way to look at it too is, so we're presenting roughly a $23 million general fund budget. You could say just this one department is a little more than 10% of that.
Anything else on this item?
Well, that kind of confuses me, actually. So you're saying, this isn't really one department, this is funding.
Well, this one
5 things.
department in the general fund is funding other funds, you know, like the
Oh,
major and
okay.
local street and the Lakeview Arena
Okay.
fund.
All right. Okay, thank you.
It's a number bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay, going on, next up is energy enhancements, page 69. This has to do with the Johnson Controls project that was started in FY18. And this is really just showing what the TELP payment, that was how we financed the projects. Again, that's a project that I think it was estimated to be about $28 million total, but over 20 years, we would see significantly more in savings. But to finance that 28 million, we had to take out what's called the TELP program, which is basically a lease purchase kind of a program. But so what we're showing here is the payment amount that will be made for FY21. And really that's all that is. It's just showing the money coming in from the other departments that benefited, and then the payment going out to pay the lease purchase that we had.
So it's not paying for itself? Or am I reading it wrong?
Not in the early years, but when you look at it 20 years out, it's supposedly will more than pay for itself. So.
It's guaranteed to, correct?
The first 5 years are guaranteed, and then if we want more than 5, we can purchase that, but it's basically just all been put into place, so we should start seeing savings in certain funds, and like I said, over 20 years, it should be a very good thing for the city.
Okay, you lost me again. If we're only 3 years in and we're guaranteed to have savings in the first 5 years, we're losing money.
Well, the project started in FY18, and it was just recently closed out, so that's when the 5 years starts. So I think October of the beginning of this fiscal year is really technically year one. So we didn't lose 2 years on the guarantee because of, everything is being put into place. So the 5 years starts the current fiscal year that we're in now.
Is it fair to say that we're going to be able to, at the end of next year, maybe not during this, the same thing that we're doing now? I'm really excited to start seeing some real numbers. And, I'm just wondering how long we have to wait to see, where those investments are coming
Yeah,
back.
we've already started seeing savings, and we can talk about it more when we get to those funds, but particularly in like the wastewater treatment fund, significant savings there in power, and we're seeing savings in other funds as well. And Eric will be presenting, I think, the third session. Since he was the project manager, he might be the one to ask more specific questions, but I will say, we are starting to see some savings, and part of it too was, the automated meter reading, which, kind of got off to a rough start, but we are starting to see some benefit there as well, so.
Debt service?
Okay, our second most favorite topic, debt service. So this first page, 71, this shows all of the debt that the city has.
Small.
Which in principle, we're showing we owe roughly $88 million in total. And then if you look at, it's also broken out by fiscal year. So if we were to add on no more new debt, we'd be paying debt off until the year 2036. So if you just look at the 2021, the 21, FY21 line, that P is the principal we're paying off, and then the I is the interest. And if you carry that across, in principal, we're paying off just short of $7 million in principal and just over $3 million in interest. So that's really close, very close to $10 million. The overall city budget is about $72 million. So if you look at it, 10 million of that $72 million is going towards debt service. And then the next couple of pages, it just takes the same schedule and just shows a different presentation. Like page 72 is really what we call the general fund portion, but it's more than just general fund. This is debt that when we issue for our capital improvement projects, the general fund, the major and local street funds, and our utility funds are all contributing a portion of it. But this is just showing, those capital improvement bond portions. Then the page after that, page 73, is showing basically the non-general fund portions, like the library, the brownfields, and also debt specific to the utilities. You can see that broken out as well. Then the page after that, page 74, that shows the TELP lease payment. So I highlighted FY21, that's the payment we'll make 21, but then you can see what the payments that will be made all the way up through 2037. And it shows not only the total payment, but each individual fund's breakout of what they will owe. Then after that, like page 75, there was an earlier question by the Mayor Pro Tem, basically, there is a cost to issuing bonds. And this is where we put in the general fund portion, and we just put in $5,000, that's a guess. Usually when you issue a bond, you budget for 2.5% for issuance cost, and that cost is spread out all the various funds that participate in the bond issue, and this is just kind of an estimate of what the general fund might expect to see, but we really won't know until we have issued the bonds what that cost will be. And then the next few pages, it's just showing the individual debt service funds. It tells you not only the title of what that fund is, but what the debt was issued for and when it's projected to be retired. And that runs through the next several pages. But really, it's just all summed up in the schedules we just showed. So, any specific questions related to debt? We're at a AA right now. Through Standard & Poor's, AAA is the highest you can get. The next highest is AA+, and then AA. So for a community with our demographics, that's really extraordinary. As I like to say, the bond world loves Marquette. They know that, even though we do have debt, we're very committed to making sure it's paid off.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
Jerry, I'm looking on page 86, and I see debt service bond funding, it looks like we're returning $1 million.
Page 86.
Page 86.
Yeah, that's the Founder's Landing, which we actually paid off this in the current, well, actually last fiscal year, we paid that off. Yeah.
So that's already paid off?
Yes. That one and the forest land, the Heartwood Forest land, we paid off last fiscal year. Yes.
Well, it was a pleasure to see something with Founder's Landing that we already did in terms of paying off. Thank you.
Yes.
Agreed. Thanks for pointing that out, Commissioner Stonehouse.
So if,
Oh, Commissioner Bonds?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you for all this information. Gary, I think this is really helpful to see. Of course, here a lot of people express concern about debt that the city holds. My question would be if you could try and summarize some of this data that we have in front of us here. Would you, over say the next 5 years, anticipate that the total amount of debt held by the city and the total amount of principal and interest we're paying to decline over the next 5 years, or would you expect it to stay about the same?
Well, the way we do it, the policy that we use is to not issue more debt than what we pay off.
Right.
Now, we try to exclude from that the brownfield portion of that. So roughly, we're looking at the city portion being about roughly $5.5 million. So the city portion of the debt should kind of hold steady. If we're paying off, say, $5.5 million each year and we're issuing $5.5 million, then it should stay steady. But the overall city debt should start seeing a decline because we aren't including the brownfield portion of that. And the biggest portion of that is, related to the new hospital. And when we issued that debt, it was interest only for the first 3 years. I think FY21 will be the first year in which we're starting to pay principal. So we'll actually should start seeing a reduction in overall city debt based on that. Now that could change, based if, the brownfield does some more projects that we have to bond for, that could certainly change that. But based on what we have today, overall, that $88 million total, we should start seeing a little bit of a decline based on the policies that we have in place now.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Anything else from the commission? and debt service.
Okay, thank you.
Gary.
That concludes the central administration part. Now we'll get into administrative services, which is headed up by Jen, which consists of city clerk, elections, HR, and IT. And following up on what Ron said, Jen was truly thrown into the fire, and she has done a bang-up job, and I'm really pleased to call her a fellow department head, and she's been very helpful, and I know she's gone through a lot and still going through a lot of things, but I just want to thank Jen for her hard work and dedication. So Jen will, I don't know if she has any comments, otherwise we can go to Kyle to start the city clerk budget on page 106.
Okay, I got what I believe is a finger point from Jen, so I think I'll just go. I just want to say we were so excited, I'm so excited that we got the Zoom setup working, that even though I'm sitting to the left of the entire commission right now, I'm on Zoom as well, so the people at home can see me. So our budget is twofold. We've got the city clerk's budget, 215, and then elections, 262. So I'm going to go over both of those pretty quickly here, starting with page 106. Obviously, the background for the department. We have 3 authorized positions. As noted everywhere, we had originally not budgeted any change in those salaries for this coming year, and you're actually going to see a slight decrease. Obviously, there's some staff turnover. The city clerk line item is going to be lower than is reflected in that budget. And then the deputy city clerk line item will be lower as well, just because new people coming into new positions are going to start automatically at a slightly lower salary. The only thing of note, I think, in the program statistics that I would point out is the Freedom of Information Act line item there. You can see the last 3 years. There's something of an uptick this year. I would say the number of requests that we get is increasing, and the amount of staff time, both our time and other department staff time, is increasing as well. That's statutory. There's nothing you can do there, but it is something that's definitely on our radar year to year. Moving ahead, page 107 starts our fee schedule, which is fairly lengthy. Our fees include, cat and dog licenses, business licenses throughout the city, FOIAs, a list of voters if people are getting voter lists from us. And we have a fairly standard process. I think this was a conversation with Gary from a couple years ago, where we will typically look to increase those fees with the general inflation. Cost of living, it's roughly 2%, but a lot of the fees are so small that raising them 2% would reflect a $3 increase or something like that. So what ends up happening is every couple of years we'll raise it 5% or something closer to that.
I think we just lost the phone.
Yeah.
I think it hit 2 hours. I saw 1 hour and 59 minutes, and it went blank.
Yeah, so I'm assuming what's happening right now is that the people on Zoom can't hear us because that phone just dropped, but people at home can still hear us. So I'm sure Jen is stressing right now because she can't hear anything I'm saying. And I'm getting a text over here.
Well, as long
slowing
as the
down.
people at home can hear us, you can go ahead for now, and thank you, Sean, for getting us reconnected.
So the business license fees are pretty standard. There's slight increases across the board. You can see on page 107, we've removed business license non-compliance fines, and that is housekeeping, basically. Those fines are governed as civil infractions. They're listed at the very front end of the whole city fee schedule. So those fees aren't changing or being removed, but they're addressed elsewhere. The mobile food vending non-compliance fine directly beneath it is also staying the same, but it is addressed further down in this fee schedule, actually. Moving on to page 108, where that is addressed. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to multitask real quickly here. And, sorry. That's the sound of us getting into. Oh my gosh, get out of my way. Okay, now I think everybody should be back online. So continuing the business license conversation, our fee schedule includes marijuana establishments, which I just want to touch on real briefly. That is a big number. And if you look at marijuana establishments, page 108, we have actually added this estimated revenue for 2020. That was kind of a late addition. This is an item that didn't exist when this budget was adopted last year. That is $5,000 per year per applicant. So this estimate is, it was an educated guess that prior to the end of this current budget year, we would have 3 of those applications where people had given us $5,000 per. We've actually got 3 right now, and it looks like we may have 4 this budget year. Moving forward into next year, we've got, roughly the same amount. There may be 2 or 3 additional, it sounds like, that come online, and then the ones that have already been licensed need to renew that license at the same cost once a year. So that's, these first 2 years are probably going to be unusual with that, and then we'll get to a point where it's just going to be however many shops are in town licensing themselves every year. So moving on to, that font is very small on my screen. 109 here, I've got fees number 607, 215, 607, sorry, I'm gonna go to the hard copy. 215607, I just wanted to point out here, you're going to see a bit of an uptick in the projected year end from what we had originally budgeted, and that is because that line item contains candidate filings. Candidates filing for office have the option of getting 25 signatures or paying us $100. Typically, it's somewhat rare for a candidate to pay us $100. This time, the filing deadline was in April, and there was something happening in April where people were telling you not to go face-to-face and get signatures. So 9 out of 10 people that filed for office gave us $100. That's all that is. And additional note, 801, 215-801 is professional contractual, and that includes our codifying of the city code every year. So that's based on the number of pages that we're amending in the city code. And this year we had a sewer ordinance that clocks in at, by the time it's formatted, 140 pages maybe, and it's a charge by page. So there is an uptick in that budget to account for that item. So that's it for clerk. I don't know if elections is, there's really not a clear delineation between the 2 departments, but I don't know if you want to ask questions about clerk and then move to
Do you have questions about
elections.
elections or
No,
clerk?
clerk.
Clerk, okay, because there's a separate section on elections.
Yeah. Just, and maybe this will come up later, but could you refresh our memories on, theoretically, we're going to get marijuana revenue from the state? Do you have that in your head, or maybe Sean does? Is that, that won't come for how many more years? Just, it made me think of it.
So I believe, and Sean can correct me, it's sort of like the revenue, the cloudy revenue sharing calculation you're talking about. It is based on,
But I just want to.
it's based on an
What's the
excise
timing?
tax taken off the top. Oh, it's back here, Sean. It's based on an excise tax taken off the top of retail sales. And then it's run through a magic machine in Lansing, and they figure out what the locals get. And my recollection of it is that the kickback from the state is going to be based on the number of retail establishments active in any jurisdiction. So my understanding would be if we had 2 shops here and a city of 200,000 had 2 shops, that would be similar. We would get similar amounts back. I don't know if Sean knows any more about that.
Yeah, that's the way it was presented in the legislation. But for the first few years, I think we're coming up just on the end of the first year. The state is allowed to recover a lot of costs. There's a significant portion of funds that are being directed to, I think, veterans' mental health research, and I think there's other hands in our pot.
University research too.
Yeah, so it's really hard to predict how much money we're going to get or even how much revenue the state's realized. I know in other states, they saw a general increase for the first 5 years of implementing legal marijuana. So it's going to be difficult to predict anything on that without a few years under our belt.
Okay. Keep going.
Well, a quick question and follow up on that. Do you think, or is there any way, any information that we've run across that can say that, you know, I'm looking at $25,000 worth of application fees here going, if that happens every year because they're renewing every year, or there's a new one that comes in and one goes out, whatever, let's just say there's an average of 5. Because everybody's saying that this number is going to be so grand that we're going to get back from the state, and I don't think it's going to work out that way. But is there any way for us to say, can we expect more than $25,000, or can we expect, you know, is there any kind of quantifiable number that we can throw around?
So that would be trying to predict the market on establishments and businesses in Marquette. I don't know that we can do that. I think the 5 number is based on the number of people who've approached us pretty seriously about opening an establishment in the city, and those will be 5 different recreational establishments.
Yeah.
So, in terms of that $25,000 number, I believe that's what that's based on. No other kind of license type or business has approached us yet.
Yeah,
So
I'm just saying the kickback that, you know, after everybody takes the cream off the top of the taxes and all that stuff, and the state says, you've got 5, we can say, you know, based off of what Colorado was doing, these types of communities that had 5 establishments in it, we're getting back this much in tax revenue, which I guess it's
yeah, I think the
completely
only
speculating, I would imagine right now, but I'm just curious.
The only say we had over it would be that $5,000 license fee, and we're allowed to charge up to $5,000. In terms of tax revenue, we just have to wait and see how the state really ends up doling it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so for the numbers, we have 3 that have applied through us with a completed application. I've had contact from somebody who I know is like getting ready to apply for a 4th. And then that still leaves out, you know, several conversations with other people that we've had. So I don't think 5 different shops is unreasonable. I mean, with conversations for original applications at least.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Let's move on to elections.
Okay, and then,
Commissioner Bonzal has a question.
Yeah.
I was looking at you the whole time to see. You were too busy on your computer over there.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And sorry to interrupt you there, Kyle. I did have just a couple of questions. So first is my understanding that we are currently working with the NMU student government, looking at the possibility of establishing a satellite clerk's office on campus this fall to promote student participation in the November election. I think it's a really cool idea. I'm super excited about it, but I was just curious, do you feel confident that you would have sufficient funding for that new initiative within the current fiscal 20 budget and this proposed fiscal 21 budget?
can I answer that question while giving you my elections budget elevator pitch?
Sure.
Same time? So that would be covered in 262, our elections budget. And I guess just from the top, I mean, I'm talking to page 110 here, but some statistics that are sort of covered there. Registered voters from August of 2018, so that was the midterm election 2 years ago. Registered voters from August of 2018 have increased by 700. You're probably looking at 500 more at least prior to, I mean, based on history, prior to the November election. Our vote total has not really changed August to August. However, our absentee balloting total, we had 1,400 absentee ballots in August of 2018. We had 1,400 in August of 2019. We had 4,351 last week. Our permanent list, so this is a list of people that every election we will send an application for an absentee ballot to them. They have to request that to be on that list. That has grown from 1,400 a couple years ago to 4,000. And then you're staffing an in-person election as well. And it's pretty much the same static group of workers with a few in and out, people leaving and not working again, new people coming in. That's fairly standard. However, it's fallen from about 60 people, if you look at the list for the last couple of years, we were able to muster up 46 for the August election, trying to staff as heavily as we could. So I would say there are some challenges. Our same-day registration is one of them, and that, to speak to your question, Commissioner Bonzal, that is one of the reasons that we're hoping to spin off a satellite office on campus. We had 141 people in March register on Monday or Tuesday for the March election. And that was something that, had been the law for a period of time, but it wasn't, we hadn't gone through a big, busy election with those changes. So that happened in March, and so in August, what we did, if you look at 110, is we hired a couple of people. We set up a station downstairs. If any of you have been in the Barriga Gym, we have basically 3 precincts set up in quadrants. We set up a 4th precinct, and that was an area where people, if they came in on election day, rather than sitting on top of each other in the hallway here trying to wait for us, we could kind of queue them up downstairs. We would have a system to get them in an orderly fashion. And then in August, I think we had fewer than 10 people register on election day, which is not surprising. But in November, we're going to have a ton again. So part of the goal is to reach that population ahead of time if possible. The vast majority of them in March were campus students, people voting in Precinct 6, showing up to register the day of. So the idea would be that we would have these temporary voter registration aides in that authorized positions chart. These would be 2 people who would work for roughly a month leading up to the election. They would be trained on our systems in the office. They would be able to assist in the office a bit, but the goal would be to also get them into a satellite office on Northern's campus with some advertising where students or staff could register to vote. They could apply for an absentee ballot, and then hopefully in the couple weeks leading up to the election, they could actually get an absentee ballot in that office as well. It's not a bad thing, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to end up increasing those numbers. We're going to end up getting more people registering, more people applying for absentee ballots, and only some of those people will do it there instead of here. I think we're still going to get a lot of people here. So we'll then take the people who've been working in that office and put them in that station downstairs on election day to kind of help deal with that. Again, this is really tough to plan for because it's new. The law is new. COVID is messing with everything. And once we get it figured out, it's not going to be an issue for at least 2 years. We're not going to have a wave of same-day registrations for any election until possibly the midterm again. So this is something you're probably not going to see in the budget next year necessarily. So I think, we're confident. I think with the funding aspect of it, the challenge is perpetually finding the people to do that. People working election day, you're essentially asking someone if they want to work 13 hours for not a real large amount of money one day every 6 months. It's kind of takes a special person or a special kind of person. So that, I would say, is the challenge at this point. I don't know if you have follow-up, if that answers your question.
No, I think that's great. And actually, my second question was just going to be about what we're doing to account for the significant increase in absentee ballots. But I think that you also did a good job of addressing that in your response. So thank you, Kyle.
Yeah. So just continue. Yeah.
On the absentee question,
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
on the absentees, I went and dropped my ballot off in the drop box. I understand that you cannot open them until some certain time. Could you just maybe explain that process? And are you having the same challenge in getting people to count absentee ballots as you are to work the polls?
Yeah, to answer the second part first, I guess, the challenge probably isn't as great. We actually had a couple of people this past election who had worked for years in the polls. They had chaired in the precincts, and they told us this time around that they were not interested in sitting downstairs in a public room with hundreds of people on election day. However, they were comfortable helping us with our absentee ballot counting board, which is essentially a room where it's you and a small number of people for the day. There's no public allowed. You're actually sequestered and locked down, essentially. So we had, I guess just to explain the process you'd asked, you have to apply for an absentee ballot. You can get an application in a number of ways. You can now actually do that entire process on a state of Michigan website now. You can go in, verify your information, click that you want to apply for an absentee ballot, and it just shows up in our computer system here. When we get that application and we have ballots on hand, we just mail a ballot to you, essentially. You need to complete the ballot, vote it, sign the outside of the envelope, seal it, and get it back to us, either in the mail or in the drop box in normal times, over the counter, and it has to be in our office by 8 p.m. on Election Day. And we keep them in several bins in several different locked locations in City Hall, as space is becoming an issue with regard to that. And they stay sealed. And then on Election Day, there's a team of people actually in this room who deal with opening and processing all of those ballots. So nothing gets opened until polls open on Election Day, and they spend all day in here. And they're using the exact same machines that you see in the precinct when you vote. They tabulate the ballots and then make sure all their totals balance and the numbers match the number of ballots we gave them. And then those get reported back to the county as essentially their own precincts. So we have 10 precincts in the city. 7 of them are out in various locations. 3 of them are in this room, and they're all absentee ballots.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Oh, sorry.
No,
We're not all the way through the elections piece?
no, sorry.
No, that's fine. I got mixed up, so.
really like to
let's
talk about
let
elections.
Kyle finish elections and we can ask additional questions if needed.
And some of this as well is follow-up, I think, to some of those questions. So now, page 111, last page, I promise, is we have line items 262728 is postage and 740 is operating. So just to compare kind of year on year, postage is a common account. It's used throughout the city, I believe, in several different departments. It was something that we did not have active prior to this current budget year. So prior to 2020, where you see the 6,500, that was a line item that was just included in operating supplies. So that's a line item. We wanted to break that out in part to account for what we're doing with absentee balloting, which is very postage heavy. And so you can, the real comparison for what we're coming up against is looking at operating 740 for 2017 actual on the far left of that chart. That's the number from the 2016 presidential election from that year. So that's the budget year that started with that presidential election in November, and then comparing that to the requested now operating plus postage, because we've broken postage out. I think postage is going to continue to increase. I did literally moments before I started talking and the phone shut off, I got a confusing email from the state talking about they were attempting to help us out with a lot of funding for elections in August, and they're promising a lot of broad things that might come to pass. They're talking about funding a portion of absentee ballot envelopes, which is a large expense. They're talking about possibly giving us return postage on our envelopes, which I know has been a question. It's an expense that we have not undertaken to this point. It sounds like the state might do that for us. But on the other hand, they've also mentioned that they'll be sending out applications, essentially AV applications, again, it sounds like, to everybody in the city who has not requested a ballot. So that's one thing that really spiked our permanent list this year, really increased the number of ballots we got, is that everybody got that application automatically this year. And that is it.
Commissioner Schlegel?
So with that being said, would it be unrealistic for either the state or the city to include a fee to request a absentee ballot that covers that expense?
I think it would be, yeah.
And
I think it would probably be vaguely considered a poll tax.
Oh, okay.
I think.
That makes sense. How about a donation? Huh, that's an interesting result of this campaign. I'm quite surprised that there wasn't something that came along with that, because it's been pushed so hard that whether the state or whoever would not have eased that burden a little bit. So thank you.
And they did, like I said, they did do a fair amount with PPE with COVID, and then also with they did help us to buy some portion of envelopes But what we're getting signed up for through this process is an annual ongoing cost for postage and for printing and for envelopes. So it's a longer term thing.
Commissioner Bonzo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I would just note, on that subject, that given that we now, Kyle, I believe you said that our permanent absentee voter list has increased from about 1,400 to about 4,000 people. Was that correct?
Yeah, so the March election, there was a spike just because it was the first big election where we had no reason absentee voting. It was the first busy election for that. So there was a spike there to 2,000, 2,400 maybe. And then the additional 1,500 or 1,600 came with the statewide mailing of the applications.
Great, thank you. And so I guess my point being that given that the permanent absentee voter list is now so much larger than it's ever been, that we might expect, even after COVID-19 is over, significantly more people to be voting absentee than have in the past, maybe double or triple the number of people that have in the past, just consistently moving forward forever. So I think that's something we maybe need to consider in future budget processes, but of course, there's still a lot of uncertainty right now. I would also just say that I have seen, I think, to the point that you made, Kyle, about, the state coming in and potentially funding return postage for our absentee ballots. I have seen individual municipalities that have been doing that as well. For example, the city of Grand Rapids, some other actually smaller cities and towns too. So I think Genesee County did. So something that we might want to look at in the future, especially if the state doesn't come in. I mean, personally, I don't know how my colleagues feel about it, but personally, I think that making it that much easier for people to vote as a young person, I can tell you that voting absentee from college, I rarely, if ever, had a postage stamp on me when I went to mail back my ballot, and it was kind of annoying. So, might discourage less determined voters, I suppose.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
So to that end, in your spare minutes, maybe if you could give us an estimate of what that would cost as a revenue source, because the increases, we're talking about $20,000, if I'm reading this right. I mean, we have a $72 million budget, and $20,000 to make sure people can vote seems quite reasonable to me. And if there's a postage cost to do the returns, I would at least like to be presented that number and have that opportunity.
Yeah, we can get that together.
Other commissioners? Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Okay, next up will be Jen for the HR portion, page 112. You want to teach me how to do that?
What was that, Jenna?
Jenna stepped away. I'm going to just lead the meeting while we're doing the transition.
Okay. I just wanted to quick say thank you to Kyle too while we're giving kudos. He's a real MVP of this organization, especially during the stay-home order and COVID challenges. So he's run point on the clerk duties and these technical Zoom meetings with Sean and really stepped into the leadership role of city clerk when asked. So thank you to him.
We're still bringing up the Zoom, actually, Jen. At least we can't see it yet here in the room.
Okay.
Or are we? I'm waiting for the go-ahead.
There she is.
Okay, we're good to go. Thank you.
Okay. The HR budget starts on page 112, like Gary said. Got it?
Yeah, we're good.
We have 3 authorized positions in the HR, myself, as well as the payroll clerk, Tim Reich, and human resources benefits coordinator, Michelle Schrader. Those 2 positions are in the City Hall bargaining unit. And I can't say enough about these 2 also. These 2 individuals really provide a great service to the city. During the stay-home order, they did not miss a beat working from home, transitioning our operation to a hands-off digital platform, maintaining their workload, on top of all the new requirements we've been faced with without losing a personal touch our staff and vendors deserve. So thank you to them too. For program statistics, There's one thing in particular I wanted to point out, and that was related to the full-time employees. Last year, like I said earlier, 2 new positions were approved through the adopted budget, and those were the motor pool mechanic as well as the full-time rental inspector in the fire department. And the director last year said the number of full-time employees would be expected to go up to 176, but you can see we have not yet filled the mechanic position, and we've not yet backfilled the new position in the fire department, so this number did remain at 174 for fiscal year 2020. For part-time seasonal employees, the FTEs, we did see a bit of a decrease in overall full-time equivalent, and this is due mainly to changes in staffing related to COVID-19. As I stated earlier, too, our health insurance is budgeted solely based on the hard caps for public employer contributions plus the cost of dental and vision coverage. So these, as these hard caps increase slightly each year, our costs trend up as well. And then our retiree coverage is not based on the hard caps, but does fluctuate with premium renewals and new retirees and previous ones aging off the plan. So it's just small changes there. Our pension contributions are provided by our annual actuarial evaluations and trending up as we discussed earlier also. The next page shows the fee schedule. The only applicable fees for HR are COBRA fees. If someone leaves our insurance plan, they have the ability to continue their coverage, but we receive 2% administrative fee, which is actually 2% of the cost of the premium, or similarly a 50% fee for a disability extension, and these fees are set by law. The number of people that we will choose to go on COBRA coverage is very hard to predict, so this is a ballpark number. And as far as I know, we've never had anyone on COBRA with a disability extension. And then the next page, 114, shows our revenues and expenditures. The revenues, again, reflect those from COBRA. The fixed charges are for providing services to the library and the Public Library and Housing Commission, and these charges cover their payroll and benefit administration. Reimbursements are generally very small, but are also very hard to predict. It's something, if, for example, we're overcharged for something in our group health plan and we're reimbursed and the amount is so small, we won't redistribute that back to all of our members. It just goes into reimbursement. Under expenditures, not a whole lot in the HR budget. It's mostly salary and fringe benefits due to the service we provide, but I'd like to point out the line item on 101-270-710, which is performance pay, and this is a fund for potential merit bonuses for management employees at the city manager's discretion, and we've done this a few times in the past. The majority of the rest of the budget is pretty similar to last year's as expected. Professional contractual still includes funding for potential arbitration costs. Physicals and drug screens are estimated based on the number of positions we anticipate having to fill over the next fiscal year. Line item 961 is it's called employee benefits, but it's the North Star EAP, which we offer to all of our full-time employees. And that did increase just slightly from $2.50 per employee per month to $3, so that is reflected there. Otherwise, any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? I think you did a nice job explaining, and I know a lot of these items you covered in your presentation earlier. Thank you, Jen. We really appreciate the work you continue to do.
Thank you. But before we move on to hear from Todd Curtis, our IT manager, I'd be remiss not to mention the service this group provides to the city also. Back in March, they went from business as usual to getting all of our administration up and running remotely in a matter of days. So thank you to IT. They are rock stars.
Nice to hear those shout outs. Thanks, Jen.
Next up will be Todd. There's 2 technology-related funds. The Ed Fund, which is actually the fund in which we're able to broadcast these meetings out to the public, and then the IT fund, which I said a little earlier, treated the municipal service fund to the city. So if Todd could start page 115. Thank you.
Okay, I think Kyle handed out to the commissioners kind of a budget hearing statement that I want to start with. It's a 5-page document. Hopefully you have this. I'd like to go through this really quickly before we go through the rest of the documentation. And really, commissioners, what I'd like to do is just give a quick overview of the IT department and give you a little bit of an idea of what we have going on, what we've been doing, and kind of respond back to you as some of the things that you've approved for us to purchase and utilize, and I wanted to report back as well. So I'd like to start with our the new virtual server management software that we got. This was a mid-budget year item that was not foreseen. We didn't know at the beginning of this budget year that our licensing on our servers was going to expire. When it did, we were able to continue to manage the servers in the condition they were, and we were going to try to eke through the rest of the year just status quo, but we couldn't make any changes or upgrades, and so we got to a point where there's some critical changes that had to be made. We came to the commission and asked for a large sum of money mid-year to buy this software and also to expand our storage drives, which was also critical to continuing to protect our data and store our data. So just like to report back that a lot of the issues we had with the previous software have been resolved. The new software that's been installed has become rock solid. It's very stable. We haven't been this stable. We're very pleased with that. The management of the softwares and the servers has become much easier. The security is much better. So we're overall very pleased and very grateful to the commission for seeing that need and approving that mid-year purchase. Another thing that we do that doesn't always reflect in our budget documents is we started about 4 years ago paying for KnowBe4 training. This is security training for all city employees. And so this training has also been very successful. The industry average for clicking or security breaches or being phished, people being fooled through email or other physical security breaches, the industry average is 33.1% of the people fail. And when the city began using KnowBe4, our employees were very close to that average. I believe the first average we came up with was about 31%, so very close to that 33%, just on the better side of that. And over the last 4 years, we've improved steadily. Now the city employees have dropped their phishing percentage or the risk percentage to 5.1%, which is well below the industry average. And also I would mention that continues to trend downward as we continue to train. We weren't able to train during the stay-at-home order, so the last training we began in July, and that will end in a few weeks. 78% of the employees have already taken that training with a few weeks to go. So we have a very good buy-in. The employees are all willing. Most of them seem to be willing to take the training and take it seriously. I've had some good comments from many employees that they've learned a lot through the training. So anyway, I think that's been a real positive for the city. So Jen mentioned that the remote network access during the stay-at-home order came about fairly quickly, and that's true. Our policy has been not to let people remote into the network because of security reasons. We've had, other than IT staff that has to be able to remote in for repairs and emergencies, we've only allowed one other staff member to consistently remote in. And that person was using a similar software to the IT department. It's extremely expensive if you use that for all employees, so it was not an option when a large percentage of our employees had to remote in. So our staff quickly reviewed as many options as they could. They came up with a free solution that seemed to work at first, but we realized that each day, to use that solution again, the computers would have to be restarted. IT staff would have to quickly go in and remote in and start those computers, or if possible, if they're physically located near them, they could restart them, but it was kind of an issue. So then we found a paid service that's very affordable, and that's what we started using, and we had great success with that. But within the first couple days, we had employees remoting from home. So I'm very grateful. IT staff, we only have 2 technicians besides myself. There are 3 people in this IT department. And Mike Adams and Max Janal work extremely hard, but they also have great industry knowledge. And the reason they're able to come up with those solutions is because they have good experience. Max was working in the industry for 12 years before he started here. He's now been with the city for 5. He just got his 5-year certificate. So I'd like to congratulate Max Janal on being 5 years with the city. He's got 17 years of industry experience, and it shows. Mike Adams has been with the city 2 years. I don't know how many years experience he has in the industry. I know he came from the Navy, and he has a phenomenal background, and he also worked for 906 Technologies here locally, and just has vast experience. So we're very fortunate to have both these men in our department. I have a list on this document, if it's in front of you, of completed projects and current upcoming projects. I don't plan on reading them all. If you just like to see, it's not an exhaustive list. It's just sort of throw out there so you get an idea of what are some of the things we're doing besides just responding to help desk tickets as they come in. Staff is extremely busy, and we're not complaining. Again, we are just very fortunate to have these men who can keep up with the demand, and because of their expertise, they seem to really come up with the best solutions. I know when Max started here 5 years ago, he had come from Rio Tinto and also working for schools down in Holland, and he had some great suggestions for security, and so we changed some of our security policies and implemented them, and they were brilliant and have been extremely useful to the city. Also, Mike Adams, since he's been here, has recommended a lot of different system changes that have saved the city money while improving security and management. A lot of the things that we've done is gone from manual work and manual monitoring to basically we have systems set up to monitor our equipment, and we just check in on that when there's issues. We get emails sent to us. It just makes our job much more easy and allows us to work on projects and complete help desk tickets. So we could not do it without some of these newer tools that have come in the recent years. We're very fortunate to have that.
Pat, I really appreciate this document. It's really nice to see the incredible amount of work that you all have been doing, and I have to admit, I don't understand good majority what these things are. You know, I think during COVID, it's been really clear to us that technology is important. We're using so much technology right now. I had hoped to try to get out of here by 8 or 8:15 at the latest, so I'm wondering if you can maybe, you know, include some of the highlights and walk us through as best you can while still hitting those high points.
Sure, thank you. Just the last thing I would say on the overview is about a decade ago, in 2009, a little more than a decade ago, we had about 280 devices that we worked on as a department. Those are things that we had to manage, configure, repair when they were broken. That over the last decade has gone up. I say 48% in the document. It actually is about 52%. We now have over 589 devices that we work on, that we have to manage, and configure and repair on top of everything else. So that was the last comment for that. The other 2 pages or 3 pages in this document, I put in there in case you had questions on a couple things. When I put the budget together, I had some questions on why the increase was so great this year, because you'll notice that we've gone up about $160,000, which is not common for the IT budget. Usually the increases are slide, last year we went down $3,000. So I have it broken out by the different cost codes and what some of the increases and decreases were. And I put that in there for you to look over. I'd be happy to answer questions when we're done here. And the last page, we feel it's really important that we now switch from G Suite to Microsoft Outlook. And I have a myriad of reasons why. We've been wanting to do this for 4 or 5 years. For the last 3 years, I've looked at the conversion costs, and they were anywhere from $25,000 to $28,000 to convert. This year, we found a company that would actually do it for just over $17,000. I thought this was the perfect year to do this, to do the switch. We have business needs that cannot be met with G Suite, that can only be met if we make this change. So including paperless billing that the city's been trying to do for quite some time. So I have a sheet in there that explains all the reasons why we need to do that, and we are recommending that we spend that money this year to go forward with that. With that, I'll go ahead and go through the department fact sheets. So the very first one that we have is the PEG channel. There's not really any changes. The PEG channel stands for Public Education and Government, and we get funds from the local cable company to help us basically put out the cable channel, channel 191. We've used that money that we get from the cable company can only be used for PEG services for channel 191. And so right now, the money that we hadn't paid, we have spent for the new audio recording system, audio video recording system. We didn't have enough money in PEG to actually purchase that. We borrowed money from the IT 628 account, and that is being paid back every year with the money, the revenue we receive from the cable company. And so Gary tracks that, and that will be paid back in a handful of years. There's really, I don't know if you might have questions. There's really not much to say here about. The only line item is for repair and maintenance. We really don't have anything else going on. And right now, it's just a matter of running the equipment and taping the meetings. The equipment's fairly new.
Yep, no questions on that one, Todd. We appreciate it. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. So in the 628 fund, we have the positions. My position's going to go up because I'm still in the step process, and so that's why that goes up. Our network specialist, Mike Adams, also still in a step year, so his salary goes up. Max Janot has completed his steps, and so his salary this year will not go up. And due to the budget restraints, it doesn't look like there will be a raise this year. So as far as the program statistics, the auction, this doesn't just include IT. Actually, IT does not sell or auction very many items. This includes motor pool. So a lot of the money that you see there, a small portion is IT. A lot of that is the sale of old vehicles and equipment. Help desk calls, that's self-explanatory. We have, when I did this, we had 23 open at the beginning of the year. We've had around almost 1,200, and about the time I did this, we had about 25 calls open. We average anywhere from 20 to 30 calls open at any given time. So next, this hasn't changed either. We get our revenues. Property lookup fees have been $2 for quite a few years. It shows the number of transactions we need to break even. We usually come really close to breaking even, or we just get a little over that each year. Video recording for the last several years, we've had it in the fee schedule. If people want to rent chambers and have us record meetings, we charge back for that time, staff time. And I don't remember anybody in the last 3 years actually using that, so that revenue we don't see revenue there typically, but we could. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, and then on page 119, if you could just give us the highlights, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, again, our budget went up 160,000 this year, which is not common. I charge back in two ways. The IT budget gets charged back to the departments. IT doesn't really have its own budget because just about everything used is either an enterprise cost, which is shared across all departments, or a department-specific cost. And so, again, if you want to study this, I put on page 3 in the handout, I gave you the increases and decreases, just the highlights. One of the large increases was from Itron. It's a $60,000 increase from what we used to pay. That is for the water metering system, but also there's a large promise from JCI that the revenues will come back much greater than the expenditures. We're waiting to see that. So that's a large portion of the increase. In the PD, we're charging back police department. Their tablets are at end of life, and they're switching to laptops for the patrol cars. That includes not just the laptops, but docking stations, antennas, mounting equipment. And so we've actually budgeted $30,000 for that. So that's being charged back to the PD. So out of that 160,000, there's 90,000 right there. I'm just going to stop talking and let you ask questions. And if you have specific questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
My most important question, Todd, is how well does Microsoft work with phone devices and Google Chromebooks? That one about gave me heart palpitations as the mayor because I'm constantly checking my email and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it the same way. And I'll do what we have to do to make the city secure. It's making me nervous.
So our email, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I just said it's making me nervous, that's all.
Making you nervous. Well, let me alleviate your fears because both Gmail and Outlook is going to be browser-based. And so it doesn't really matter what device you're using. You're going to install the app or the program and run it just like you do G Suite. The benefit comes, there's just so many benefits that come from this. We can do so much more with Microsoft Outlook. And the issues we've had with G Suite is they're really hard to get support from. And they'll change policy at the drop of a hat without telling us, and then our things break. And we start getting tickets, and we go through and we try to repair things, and sometimes we do it in a week. As far as paperless billing, we have not been able to get that. It worked for about 3 months, and now hasn't worked for a year and a half.
All right.
That won't happen without.
I'll ask you more of my questions offline after, but to be determined if I will support this change.
Okay, great.
Other commissioners, technology questions?
Just a quick technology comment. I
Commissioner
just want to
Schlegel?
say thank you for being so amazingly efficient with the transition from everything that's happened with this COVID BS and making it so seamless for us. I thought you did a fabulous job with your team, especially with the system going down and having to be rebuilt. So I just want to give you guys a very firm pat on the back and say thank you.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Okay, thank you very much, Todd. We certainly appreciate all the work you and your team do.
Okay, next up.
Thank you, commissioners. Nice staff.
Next up will be Fire Chief Extraordinaire Ian. And Ian, I don't know if you heard earlier, but we did have a citizen comment hoping you can address the lifeguard situation at Clark Park. And when you get to waterfront safety, maybe you can address that. But we're also asking that you please be as brief as you can. We're starting to go to ANSI here and ready to bug out. So.
Understood. Unfortunately, Gary, all I heard was paper shuffling when you were talking there. I couldn't understand what you said.
Okay, I don't know if you heard at the beginning there was a public comment asking you to address the lifeguard situation at Clark Park.
Okay, will do when we get to that one. Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I'll be covering quickly 3 budgets. Fire, rental code, and waterfront. With that, if you want to start on page 120 with the fire budget. I don't have any comments on this page, so if there's any questions, let me know.
Yeah, we're good. Just keep
If
going.
not,
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Just keep going. Just keep going. Yeah.
okay, sorry, if not, pages 121 and 122 are our program statistics. I can answer any questions you have on that.
Yeah, we're good. Keep going, please. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, page 123 and 124 is the fee schedule. The only major change that we're looking for here under the notes is adding an appeals fee for both the fire and rental code appeals process. We use the Board of Zoning Appeals as our appeals board, but we can't use their fee, so we need to add one to ours. And the $325 covers our costs to the dollar.
And that's on page 124, correct?
Yes, fee schedules 123 and 124.
Okay, thank you.
And if there are no questions,
Yep.
I
we're
will
good.
move on to revenues, page 125. The only notes there, actually looking at the current budget, just if you're wondering, there's $180,000 under FEMA, and we put in for a Assistance to Firefighters grant for portable radios. That's been submitted but not awarded yet. Sorry, one second. And then for this budget, also under FEMA is a charge of $202,000, or not a charge, but a revenue, and that is for a FEMA grant for SCBA packs and bottles that will be submitted this fall. If there aren't any questions, moving on to the expenditures. Under the 740 line item for operating supplies, you'll notice that that is a lot higher. You can minus out the revenues for the FEMA grant, and basically that takes that $180,000 off of that. It's just Gary can explain that it's just how the way they have to account that. The actual charge, if we get the FEMA grant, will be a little over $22,000 or 10% of the total. The other things of note on that, we're looking for $6,000 extra for a 12-volt positive pressure fan to replace our gas-powered one. And then also we have 3 open positions right now, so we will need all their gear, turnouts, boots, helmets, uniforms, etc. After October 1. The next notes I have are going to be on the 801 professional contractual line item. We had a minor $1,200 increase in service for our cardiac monitors, and that's because we added one for our echo unit. And then also $3,000 for the hiring procedure for 3 firefighters. Lastly, and this was in this budget, like I noted in the revenues, we did put in for portable radios, so that line item looks a lot larger than what it actually is. Are there any questions on the expenditures?
Mayor Pro Tem?
The response to the Pine Street apartment fire, again, thanking you, that was, I think, one of the biggest things that's happened here in a while. Is something like that, does that show up in the budget, or is that all just accounted for and taken care of? And you don't have to go.
That's already accounted for, taken care of.
And so does that, and was that like a hit, or is that, is what I'm asking, like, did that?
You know, we'll have, anytime we have a fire or any other major incidents, we'll have overtime costs, usable material costs, things like that, but that's factored into the budget going in.
Okay, thank you.
Quick one. Thanks, Ian. What about the fast response vehicle that was in last year's budget? Does that come into the system yet?
Unfortunately, no. We do have the vehicle here. It's not ready to go yet. We have all the equipment. It just has to be installed, and we'll get it up on the road.
Thanks.
Yep.
Other commissioners on this section? He's got 2 other section, so we'll have a chance to give him accolades or questions even after his next two sections here.
Yep, so we're good to go, Ian.
Okay. Moving on to the rental code enforcement budget, page 127. If there's any questions there, I don't have any notes.
Is it going well overall? I know we added a staff member last year. Things are going well?
Yes, very well. COVID obviously, put a little bump into activities because he couldn't do inspections for quite a while, but he's catching up very quickly right now. Just using social distancing and, wearing a mask, things like that now, he's able to catch up. But yes, it is going very well.
Good, thanks.
Thank you. The actual budget on page 128, if there's any questions on revenues, I can answer those. I don't have any notes on that. And then expenditures, the only note I have again is because of the change in staffing on that, it changed the wages obviously from 2019 to 2020. And that's all I have for that budget unless there are any questions.
Any questions on the rental?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just going back and looking at the rental inspector, the number there at 26,058 goes from that to 62. What was the big bump there?
Yep, that was going from a permanent part-time rental inspector to a full-time rental inspector.
Okay.
That was right about budget season last year that got posted. I think it got added in last minute if I'm right.
Just to add into that, we had an additional cost that we eliminated by compensating the regular firefighters to do those inspections. In other words, there was a bonus paid to that. So we eliminated that bonus, eliminated the work for the regular fire crews, and moved it all into this one inspection position.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we're good to go to waterfront safety.
Okay. Yep, waterfront safety budget is next, page 129. On that page, you'll see the authorized positions, program statistics. I don't have any notes on that page unless you have questions.
No, I think our questions are probably on the next page. Thanks, Ian.
Okay. On the next page, the only change there under the program statistics, Tourist Park has been guarded this year. We didn't think we would have enough guards, but we have. And then other than that, that's the only note I have on that page. And I don't actually have any notes on the budget. There were really no changes from last year, unless you have any questions.
We did have we had a public comment question about the
The
beach.
Clark Park Beach.
Yeah, the Clark Park Beach and the beach wheelchair and what the plans are if we don't have a lifeguard there for the use of that. Margaret Brum had a question about that.
Okay. Yeah. The problem is we just don't have enough guards this year. Our most dangerous beach, because of topography and currents, is McCarty's Cove, so we have to put the majority of our focus there. And then we also try to always cover Tourist Park because we have paid campers there. And it is a steep drop off there. Unfortunately, that's the only, we don't have the staffing this year to do either South Beach or Clark Park. I don't envision this being an every year occurrence. I'm hoping that with some changes we're putting through in looking for guards and hiring the guards, that we should be doing better off. We'll do better off next year. We should be able to go back to guarding at the minimum McCarty's, Clark's, and Tourist Park. The problem we have with using the wheelchair right now on the beach is the staffing. It has to be locked up. So for someone to use it, they would have to have it unlocked by somebody, and we don't have the staffing to do that. So we're kind of in limbo on using that right now. And then also introducing someone that is handicapped for the water without a lifeguard on duty, I feel is a pretty high risk for both them and the city. So I would rather not use that on that beach until it's started.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yep. Thank you.
Probably page 131 now.
Yep, just on the budget itself.
Yeah.
If there's any questions, I don't have any notes on that. The budget itself is comparable to last year. If there's any questions, I can answer those.
I don't have any questions, but I did want to say, Ian, that you and your staff have done an incredible job. I've seen a lot in the news and our public service announcements lately, and even emails from residents and tourists alike of your folks either saving a life, especially on the waterfront, or assisting another neighboring municipality with the same kind of effort, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you very much, and I'll definitely pass that along.
Yeah, nice job. Other commissioners?
Just real quick, I missed doing the MDA drive with you guys this year. It was kind of a highlight for my last couple of years, just getting out with the public and seeing the firefighters doing that. And I look forward to hopefully being able to do that with you guys next year.
Yeah, us too. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you, Chief, for the rush job. I apologize to Rush, but you're doing an excellent job.
No
so.
problem at all.
And so that concludes our presentations for tonight. I did want to point out one thing I forgot to mention earlier, the ever popular Sleeping Dragons list on page 11. This just shows the projects and underfunded liabilities that we're looking at right now. If you want to, you can review it and we can discuss it at the next session if you want, or you can ask me questions prior to then and I'll be glad to answer. Other than that, we have concluded tonight's presentation. We'll be back again Monday night for the police department and the John Swinson show.
And Gary, thank you for the reminder in the Sleeping Dragons. Let's plan to try to quickly address that at our next budget meeting. Go through the Sleeping Dragons and the Prince Charmings.
Got that?
We've got public comment up next. Then we'll do comments from the commission and comments from the city manager, where I know he's going to address Lakeview Arena, which has been something on our minds. So first up, public comment. We don't have any. All right, seeing none, public comment is now closed. Comments from the commission. We've got 4 of these budget meetings. I think we've all had a chance to ask questions and make comments, but if you've got any more, feel free now. But I'm not going to call on everyone one by one. I'm looking around. Okay, we're good. So we'll just roll right into comments from the city manager. And again, I think he's going to address Lakeview Arena and the delaying of the icing of that arena. Thank you, Mike.
Sure, I'd like to be somewhat brief because Monday night will be our community development director, and he will be here on site to answer probably more specific questions. But to hold us over until then, the email that was circulated yesterday via social media and whatever means, other means, was not intended to be released to the public. I mean, it is public information, but it was not formulated or prepared in the position or the form that provided the sufficient information that I had originally intended for the public. That was an internal email directed to the commission. So that kind of set off a little bit of a firestorm. And I understand why, because there were a lot of unanswered questions. Well, it wasn't intended to be that way. So our intention was to follow up. But the content of the email was that I was leaning towards making a decision to not open Lakeview Arena for ice use at the regularly scheduled time, which would have been September 21st. Of this year. In order to get to that stage, we needed to start making ice, including cleaning the arena around the 1st of September. So that decision needed to be made by me soon. At the time, I was working with staff to come to that conclusion or come to a decision. My decision was being somewhat formulated by the COVID situation, or completely motivated by the COVID situation. There's a lot of factors. I mean, I'd be happy to touch on all of them later in more extent, in a greater extent, but basically, I'm a little gun shy with what happened with the 4th of July and the public reaction, I'll be honest. We received very similar feedback related to the City Fest when we were talking about granting that. And there was the incident that occurred in the community involving the Little League and Hockey League, where positive COVID tests were reported, and it caused quite a stir in the community. And those three combinations really gave me pause to, do we want to move forward with opening Lakeview Arena to youth sports? So I combined that information with weekly meetings and information with the Marquette County Health Department that showed a steady and, in my mind, somewhat significant increase in COVID cases in the county, as well as in the Upper Peninsula. And I saw the situation getting worse before it got better. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to be on the end of that responsibility, or being accused, or open the commission up to being accused of being careless, reckless, irresponsible, all those names they called us back in July. So I started the internal discussion via that email with the commission to consider delaying the opening, and then examining the opening on 2-week intervals based on feedback, information, statistics from the health department, the COVID situation, and things of that nature. This was compounded somewhat, but didn't really affect the decision, but we also have the homeless at Lakeview Arena, which will be displaced when we open the Lakeview. Right now, they have no place to go, but they are prepared to move when we need them to, or they will be prepared. But part of that is we have to disinfect the whole arena for, I think, obvious reasons. So there's a few factors here. And you put that together with the fact that it just made common sense. It was common sense to me to delay this, or at least consider delaying it, for the benefit, or in greater concern for the health of the community. The schools are coming back, Northern's coming back. I felt it was probably beneficial to us to wait until those two entities were in session for a number of weeks. For me, there would have been a barometer as to how their plans were working relative to defending or protecting against COVID. And that, for example, once the high school or the school system was in session for a month, which by my estimation would have been around the 28th of September, and their reopening plans were positive, they were working well, then I think we could have easily slid in behind them and said, you're doing well, we'll go along with you. At the same time, if it didn't go well, and they were being forced back to a digital format, or, God forbid, closing down, then we'd have been left hanging out there with an active athletic program that we would have had to cancel, I think. So, it was just a balance of everything that forced me to that decision. But for the public consumption and for the commission knowledge, we have time, and by my best estimation, the exact decision to not move ahead on our scheduled day of September 21st does not have to be made until September 7th. We have that much time to keep continuing evaluating the COVID situation. Like I said, I have regular meetings, weekly meetings with the health department. I just checked on my TV6 app, and Dr. Piggott is leaving the health department. So I didn't realize that, but he's been a good source for me and the rest of the city managers. So with that info, if the trending starts to level off or starts to decline, then maybe we'll feel more comfortable as a manager, as an administrator, and as a commission to opening up our facilities. Just the feedback I've gotten, I've lived this, we've all lived this for 6 months, and no matter what we do, we're going to be criticized, but the really nasty end of that criticism seems to be if we want to do stuff that might be seen as dangerous or a threat to the public. So that's my short version. or my
Thank you,
long
Mike. I
version.
really appreciate you running through how that temporary decision has been made and how you're continuing to reevaluate. You brought this to me a few days ago, and I supported this action. And while it's not a formal action, it was just a general support. I still do. I'm not sure that all the commissioners feel the same way, and I don't want this to turn into a mini work session of sorts. But if there's something someone wants to say, I'm happy to let you do that now if it makes sense. And I do think that maybe, depending on how that conversation goes, we may want to decide to have either a work session or something in the future, but we're not there at this time. So Commissioner Stonehouse, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that I was somewhat doubtful about the process that we followed, but I did have a chance, and again, thanks to the city manager for doing so, sending out to the commission all of the data feed that had come from county health. And that is information that, to my observation, we have not seen before. And that is quite spectacular. And if you want to look at where COVID's going and how it's getting there and the infestation rate amongst particularly young people, it is there. And I think that taking a prudent course of what the city manager is doing is exactly the correct way to go. I think that was probably certainly bolstered by the GLIAC athletic conference, stopping all activity, all sports events until, I think, until next year. So you see that happening. And you see, obviously, the Big Ten program shutting down and again, until next year. You see the same thing happening with the MAC conference. You see them falling one by one, and all of them looking at the same type of situation that we have with Lakeview Arena, a bit in a larger framework. So I think we're doing exactly the right thing. And I know it's not going to be popular with a lot of people. I understand that. But ultimately, we have to do what's best, I think, for our city, for our community, for our citizens. That's what we're paid to do here. We are the ultimate for the city of Marquette. The buck stops at this table. Regardless of what the manager may have done, it stops here with our agreement or our disagreement. We are the ones that really are, if you will, the final court of resolution. So thank you very much, Your Honor. And
Yeah, first of all, I do support the action, and I think that it's a smart course of action. I don't like the way that it was released, and I'm very unfortunate that it came out that way. It's not fair to us and to the city manager to not have a formal press release on something as important as that. At the same time, I want to express my desire to really work with the Marquette Junior Hockey Association or the entities that are using that facility to reach out and to get some input from them as to what they would like to see. Should we be able to open that facility up and put it to action? Because and it's funny because everybody says that you got to stick with your family if you're going to go somewhere, and that's social distancing. Well, these hockey families are pretty dang tight, and when these kids are together, they're usually together morning, noon, night, and summer and winter. But we have to take the best interest, health and safety of our kids and the families into this equation first and foremost. But I really want us to find. Learning last night that they've been skating at Northern with a protocol that they go in and they've got certain things that they have to do, and the social distancing and the care that's been taking place over the last several weeks with zero incidences and very strict adherence to the rules was very encouraging to me. And I really had to put my feet in the fire last night for quite some time, take some meetings on social media with, reaching out and trying to get some information from people, and got pretty snarky and pretty insulting, and I don't want to name names, but I really want to. At that same time, we really need to, again, I want to encourage them to come with a list of here's how we plan on allowing our children to get into a building with minimal parent interaction, with minimal interaction as far as any kind of utilities, facilities, the gym, whether it's the locker room or the water fountains, bringing your own water bottles, every little piece of the puzzle that's going to make it as safe as possible. Because I think these kids deserve to practice, because I think that they can be disciplined. Now, when it comes to games and bringing teams from other areas or going and visiting other areas, I think that that's another picture that's got to really be well looked at in order to make sure that it's going to be the best approach, if there is going to be an approach for that. But you know, I applaud the action, but I really feel that we need to get together with these people. And, you know, again, it comes down, I think every week I say something that comes back to self-policing and self-responsibilities and being accountable for our actions as a community, not just as a commissioner, but as a parent and as a kid that wants to play his, you know, guts out on the ice. So I look forward to seeing suggestions and hopefully, you know, I think that we've got the time, like you said, Mike, and I appreciate your input tonight. We need to get some people working on this. So thank you.
Just to add a couple comments, I am meeting with a representative of the Hockey League tomorrow, so hopefully that'll lead to some improved discussions. And just I want to make the point that the arena, I think, is, especially the junior hockey, is very important to the survival of the Lakeview Arena. I mean, they're our largest revenue source. They work well with us annually, and I understand that there are some people that think we may be transferring funds or using funds for other projects, and that's nowhere near the case. It's never been a reason, would never be a reason, and for all practical purposes, even though we do subsidize the function of the arena, it's always been something that's been greatly supported by the commission and by the administration. So there's nothing devious going on here at all. So,
Commissioner Davis?
I just, as Commissioner Schlegel said, I was very disappointed that this became an issue on social media. There is one thing I do know about our city administration, and particularly our city manager, and that is very practical and willing to listen to other people and other organizations. And I look forward to hearing about the conversations that are happening that may allow some of this to happen, although hockey families are hockey families. We were one. But those hockey children who are playing are also going to be going into the schools with other children. So we do need to make sure that we are able to do this safely. I also want to point out that this affects more than the hockey, it's also the figure skaters. And I'm hoping that we have conversations with them also. I'm appreciative that we have a little bit more time before the decision is finalized, and just hoping that we can make sure that our schools are open. As much as we want to see the youth sports and the youth activity happen, I want to see the schools be able to be safe as a priority.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem?
I think I would just thank you for the eloquent thoughts that folks have made. I think I agree with all the points that have been made. As a 3-sport athlete myself, who started before school, I started going to the gym before school opened, and who with track was there after school was done. Sports was absolutely essential to my growing up. But I think it is going to be incredibly important for our community as we navigate the schools opening. That is the priority. And so that has to come first. And I really applaud the thoughtfulness that this was applied. And yes, and that this communication was taken out of context and spread out, and absolute statements were made based on no facts whatsoever. And that is absolutely inappropriate. And we have time. We are going to have a conversation, but we absolutely, I think we should be driven by what happens with the schools and keeping our community safe, because 1 or 2 cases is still too many in this community. We do not, other countries have figured out how to stop this thing entirely. And I do not think we should settle for 1 or 2 people getting so ill. So thank you to the staff, and I'm glad the conversations are going to continue. Thank you.
All right, well, I think that it sounds like we may have more conversation in the future. We'll wait until that time to see if we need to have a decision as a commission, but for now, we're gonna allow staff to continue those conversations, and we appreciate the work you're doing behind the scenes to make all that happen.
Great, thank you.
All right, we are adjourned at, oh, I don't have the time, look it over there, 8:29 PM. Thanks, everyone.
Does it matter if the rep from the